Chapter 51. Star, The Dream, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Pa. I have to alert Executive Director O about this. Song Yoo-jun thought as he ran frantically down the steep mountain. The only thing on his mind was that he needed to escape the dungeon by any means necessary and report all the incidents he had witnessed to Executive Director O. Chung-sun had hunted 2 Jigwis and killed 3 demonic players from the Hyoff clan, as well as the White Tiger clan instructors, which suggested he had an ulterior motive. Of course, the instructors had attempted to kill Chung-sun first, so he could claim self-defense. However, if that were the case, he should have at least seemed surprised. Instead, he had exploited the instructor's ambush as if he had been anticipating it all along, uncovered the secret that tied the White Tiger clan and the Hyoff clan together, and even learned of the research facility's existence. Yoo-jun was certain that Chung-sun had some secret designs in mind. Although Chung-sun had pretended he would become Executive Director O's loyal dog, he clearly had a totally different plan in mind. Whether or not it was motivated by ambition, Chung-sun's plan would definitely involve stabbing Executive Director O in the back. Thus, Yoo-jun had to get rid of him for Executive Director O's sake. That was the conclusion Yoo-jun eventually reached. People in the present day usually thought rationally, so the phrase, death-sworn soldier, was just an archaic term seen only in old history books. However, that did not apply to Yoo-jun, as Executive Director O had given him a name and a family. Some could point fingers and call Executive Director O a villain, but not Yoo-jun. Executive Director O would be his master until the day he died. Even though his loyalty was the result of brainwashing and hypnosis using the dream sphere, he nonetheless had an obligation to alert Executive Director O as his master's shadow. Luckily, it seemed Chung-sun did not have sharp enough senses to see through Yoo-jun's concealment skill. Seeing as Chung-sun was busy treating a guy called Baek-jyo-ul or something, he had to get out now. Slip. Yoo-jun's thoughts were interrupted when he felt a sudden pain in his knee. He fell forward, bleeding profusely as he yelled in pain, "Arg! The concealment skill has been deactivated." Space distorted and Yoo-jun, who had sustained a deep injury in one leg, reappeared. Because he had been running quickly, he slid a great distance across the ground. His clothes quickly became ragged, and the blood from his wounds trailed across the ground. A shadow fell onto Yoo-jun's head. Like a kite suddenly swooping down to snatch away its prey, Chung-sun dove straight down, spreading his fiery wings. Boom! Ugh! Yoo-jun groaned. Yoo-jun instinctively reached for his waist, but Chung-sun was faster, driving Tiamat Snaggletooth into the right side of his chest. The blade entered so deeply that its tip pierced through the other side of Yoo-jun's torso and dug into the ground. Revealing a pair of gleaming canines, Chung-sun smiled coldly as he looked at Yoo-jun, who squirmed like a bug at his feet. "Glad to see you again," Chung-sun said nonchalantly. What are you going to do with me?" Yoo-jun asked, forcing himself to shoot Chung-sun a glare despite his trembling. Although he wanted to escape from Chung-sun at all costs, it seemed that he had been poisoned. Considering the fact that he was at a higher level than Chung-sun, it should have been impossible for him to be subdued so easily, but that was how things were. Unless Chung-sun's opponent was a high ranker, a gap in levels would mean almost nothing to him, seeing as he had gotten stronger after eating 2 Jigwis and becoming one himself. Thus, Yoo-jun could not understand why Chung-sun had not killed him, even though Chung-sun could have easily severed his head if he wanted to. "I was going to kill you right away, but I changed my mind because I don't want Executive Director O to suspect me," Chung-sun said as if he had read Yoo-jun's mind. "What?" Yoo-jun yelled in shock. "Why would I use another method when I have the best method?" Chung-sun remarked as he pulled out something from his inventory, making Yoo-jun's eyes widen. When Chung-sun held up the opaque marble, the dream sphere, Yu Jun realized what he was planning to do. Dream spheres were made from the Seakian flower garden's wildflowers, which made them good for erasing personality traits within the Saha world. Chang Sun was planning to place Yu Jun under new brainwashing. No, no. Ugh. Yu Jun resisted, afraid of losing his ego if he ate the sphere. However, it was too late. Chang Sun had already grabbed Yu Jun's jaw with his left hand, forcing the dream sphere into his mouth. I guess I don't need to make you swallow it, Chang Sun remarked. As soon as the dream sphere entered Yu Jun's mouth, it melted and flowed down his throat. He convulsed violently as if he were suffering from a seizure, but he eventually stopped. His eyes had lost focus, which meant his sense of self had been paused. The player Yu Jun has swallowed a dream sphere. The player's reasoning has been frozen. The player's ego has been paused. The player Yu Jun has entered the hypnotized state. Executive Director O called such a person a soulless shell, a person who had lost their soul. There seemed to be no better term to describe such a person. Stand up, Chang Sun ordered curtly as he stepped away from Yu Jun, in order to see whether the sphere worked according to Bei Wu Jiang's explanation. Yu Jun stood up, following Chang Sun's order like a machine. Despite the fact that he was bleeding profusely from his chest, it seemed as if he felt no pain. Even Chang Sun's paralysis toxin seemed to have no effect. After the first order, Chang Sun gave Yu Jun several instructions such as sit, roll, and bark, and Yu Jun carried out each one without any hesitation. Chang Sun did not get the impression that Yu Jun was pretending. However, what was the limit when it came to giving him orders? There was a chance that Yu Jun's subconscious was still intact. Kill yourself, Chang Sun ordered. Yu Jun immediately drew his sword from his waist and swung it toward his own neck. Clash. Chang Sun quickly stopped Yu Jun's sword using Tiamat's snaggletooth, and said, stop. Before receiving the command, Yu Jun had been about to shift to a reverse grip even as he staggered from Chang Sun's blow, but he stopped as soon as he heard the instruction. Chang Sun gaped slightly as he watched Yu Jun, remarking, the White Tiger clan certainly made something ridiculous. It seemed Bei Wu Jiang's explanation about how the scroll had been used to borrow the power of the had not been nonsensical or exaggerated. Chang Sun felt that he had to be very wary of the 7 cryptical books of San. If the weakest among the 3 scrolls contains this kind of ability, what kinds of abilities do the other scrolls have? Chang Sun wondered, suddenly understanding why the White Tiger clan had been so eager to find Peter's key. Before Yu Jun could bleed out too much, Chang Sun swiftly stopped the bleeding and calmly gave Yu Jun several instructions. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, you understand everything, right? Chang Sun asked. Yu Jun nodded and replied, yes, I understand. Chang Sun had given Yu Jun very simple orders. When you report about me, say there is no problem. Act as if nothing out of the ordinary happened. In short, Yu Jun's ego could resume again, but from now on, he had to be absolutely loyal to Chang Sun, not Executive Director O. However, adjusting the brainwashing and hypnosis Executive Director O had placed on Yu Jun was not easy, as the imprint was especially strong, thus, Chang Sun had needed to put in a lot of effort to change it. Still, he had some experience doing so from his time as a fiend. Thus, after several attempts, he was able to make Yu Jun his puppet in the end. The celestial world encircling serpent says you are such a snake, chuckling at your sly plan. The celestial calamity tiger watches your ambition with interest. Clap. As Chang Sun clapped lightly, Yu Jun's hazy eyes regained focus, and he immediately got down on one knee. You can go, Chang Sun said, waving his hand. Thank you, Yu Jun replied before using his concealment skill again. Swoosh! It was amazing to see how June seemingly disappeared into empty air, even though he was right in front of Chang. Sunday. This will be more useful than I thought. Chang Sun thought. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind. He commanded, "Wait." Instantly deactivating his concealment skill, June kneeled again, asking, "Do you have any more instructions? Can I also learn your movement skill?" Chang Sun asked. His original plan had been to acquire Sagittarius movement skill, Avatar's Descent, in the Fierce Tiger Library. However, as he did not know when he would be able to visit the library again, he had to find a temporary substitute. To seize opportunities in combat, it was necessary to move quickly. Chang Sun had become substantially faster after acquiring Jigwee's phantom body, which meant he could not be content with his regular inefficient movements. Luckily, most of the White Tiger clan's skills came from the 3 basic skills. Chang Sun had already learned Tiger Prowl, so it seemed he could mimic June's movement skill to some level. The skill was very useful. It enabled June to move as quickly as if he had used a lightness skill. He had often used it to hide in shadow, which was perfect for Chang Sun since he had to sneak into the research facility. It'll come in handy for Jio.ul too. Chang Sun thought. No, more than that, it would be a perfect match for Jio.ul because it was similar to his shadow steps, just as Chang Sun expected. It's called Wind's Talking Tiger. As it was derived from Tiger Prowl, you'll no doubt be able to use it. You can use this wind-type skill as a lightness skill, a concealment skill, and a stealth skill, June explained. Seeing as his expectations had turned out to be correct. Chang Sun nodded and said, "Good, then teach me. But it'll take a considerable amount of time for you to learn because there's no skill book." June trailed off. "I'll take care of it on my own," Chang Sun said, gesturing at June to begin. Although he was unsure what Chang Sun was planning, June showed him the basic movements of Wind's Talking Tiger, on the spot without asking any further questions. Just as he described, June moved very naturally as if he were riding on the wind, even though he still gave off the heavy pressure of Tiger Prowl. Again, Chang Sun commanded, making June repeat his movements multiple times. Chang Sun simply watched June without attempting to mimic him. However, after June went through the motions about 4 times. Whoosh! Chang Sun suddenly adjusted his posture and took half a step forward with his right foot. Wind began to gather with him at its center. June could tell Chang Sun was not using Tiger Kill, because unlike Tiger Kill, which released refined energy outward, the nearby energy was being pulled toward Chang Sun in the center. When he realized what was happening, June's eyes widened in shock. How on earth? June exclaimed, gaping in disbelief. Pa! When Chang Sun put his left foot forward, his body dissolved into gusts of wind. Ding! You have comprehended a new concept based on your understanding of Tiger Prowl. The skill, Wind's Talking Tiger, has been created. Wind's Talking Tiger, the basic movement skill of Calamity Tiger, derived from Tiger Prowl. Like a flying tiger that moves on the wind, you can travel bravely and swiftly. The wind follows the flying tiger. Skill level 1. Type. Active. Effect. Lightness skill. Skill synchronicity. June doubted his eyes. How long had he struggled to learn the skill in order to become executive director O's shadow? It had taken him at least several years. However, Chang Sun was already using it perfectly even though he had only seen June using it 3 or 4 times. Ever since seeing him in the Fierce Tiger Library, June had felt that Chang Sun truly seemed like a person from another world. Wish. So it's like this, Chang Sun muttered to himself. The wind coalesced again, reforming into Chang Sun, who laughed in satisfaction. Just as he expected, Wind's Talking Tiger, would be useful until he acquired Avatar's descent. I really respect you, June said with sparkling eyes. You're saying that again? Forget it, just go, Sun commanded. Yes, sir. June replied as he disappeared into the air again, looking at Sun with an inexplicable look of admiration. Even after June left, Sun practiced, Wind's talking tiger, several times. You have learned a lightness skill. Skill level increased. Skill level increased. You have learned a concealment skill. You have learned a stealth skill. When he familiarized himself somewhat with the skill, Sun gathered as much as he could and released it all at once, launching himself explosively in the direction the two Jigwis had come from. The celestial, Calamity Tiger, laughs, seemingly dumbfounded. The celestial, a good season to hunt, rummages through her stuff, to see if there is anything that can help you, one who displays excellent movements as a hunter. 1. The original text used Jujong, which literally refers to a master-servant relationship. The archaic connotations mostly appear in fiction. Considering June's brainwashed, absolute loyalty, the concept of death sworn from Xianxia is the closest term to communicate the cultural nuances. Chapter 52. Star, The Dream, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. What did Executive Director O say? Yang Sang, one asked. He said to wait because everything will be resolved soon, his subordinate timidly reported. Shit. Sang, one cursed, pounding his desk with his fists. Thud. He noticed that the sound had made his subordinate flinch, but he could not afford to care. He had bigger fish to fry. The secret Tiger Lab had practically been the core pillar and foundation of the White Tiger clan for the past 10 years. Ever since the 7 cryptical books of San were discovered, the secret Tiger Lab had invested a lot of time and manpower into deciphering and making use of the divine script on the 3 scrolls, following Executive Director O's lead. From the dream spheres that created ghost soldiers to the starlight coordinates that had played a crucial role in transforming the 3 basic skills into the 3 derived skills, the lab had succeeded in achieving remarkable results. They had even created several divine weapons, relics, and authorities. Sang, one had always been proud of his achievements, never doubting that he would make significant contributions toward making the White Tiger clan stronger than most of the large clans in the world. Thus, he had thought that secretly making some personal profit would be no problem. Why would it be a problem when he had already sacrificed so much for the clan? Besides, he had always been confident that he wouldn't get caught. The secret Tiger Lab was classified as top secret, which meant a very small number of people in the clan even knew of its existence. Because only a few people monitored the facility, it had been very easy to hide his minor personal gains, and he had had no reason to worry with Executive Director O backing him. In fact, Executive Director O was the one who had ordered Sang one to siphon off money in the first place. However, unexpectedly, that siphoned off money had become a noose around Sang one's neck. The scandal surrounding the Hyoff clan, which had been working as the lab's subcontractor, had been exposed, placing the world in an uproar. Thus, the lab staff had needed to quickly incinerate all the materials that could link them to the Hyoff clan, and had even been forced to stop the Dream Sphere manufacturing lines. The White Tiger clan members had quickly moved to silence the Hyoff clan members, but during that process, the fact that Sang one colluded with the Hyoff clan behind the White Tiger clan's back had been exposed. The White Tiger clan's cleanup crew had also discovered traces of another project that had not been reported to the White Tiger clan's executive committees. The lab staff had naturally begun whispering among themselves about how the White Tiger clan inspectors would soon search the facility. Sang one's friend in the inspection department had actually tipped him off, so he was fairly sure the inspectors would barge into the lab today. The problem was that the inspector who arrived could turn out to be Director Guan himself, the inspection department leader who was known as the Grim Reaper. Director Guan was officially the White Tiger clan's third in command, and the only person who could challenge Executive Director O. It was no secret among the White Tiger clan members that Director Guan was hell-bent on finding Executive Director O's weaknesses. In such a situation, Sang One had become Director Guan's first target, which left him scared to death. Before anything else, he had incinerated any materials that could raise suspicion. However, it was the investigation department members, who were known to even dust a target's underwear, who were on the move. Thus, it would not be strange if they found something in a place Sang One had not expected. Perhaps he would even be framed, or be abandoned by Executive Director O, just like the Hyoff clan. In fact, he had sent Executive Director O distress calls several times, but the only answer he had gotten was, "Wait. I've paid him so much this whole time." Sang One thought bitterly, gritting his teeth. Thus, Sang One had been desperately searching for a way to survive, even as he felt betrayed. He had even considered fleeing to some other organization with all the lab's confidential documents. If anyone were to see the Gildal project that had been initiated and supervised by Executive Director O, they would be interested. Of course, the council would be a dangerous place for a demonic being like him, so he had to go somewhere else. As the organization he would join had to be as big as the White Tiger clan, he thought the Sword of Osung clan would be his best choice. Despite the fact that the Osung group's official advocacy was social justice, it was still a chaebol, giving Sang One a sense of baseless confidence that the Sword of Osung clan would take him in. "I've obtained a fine vessel too," Sang One thought, remembering the test specimen he had acquired after hearing his subordinates report a couple of days prior. The current batch of trainees was strangely very talented, and many had exceptional abilities. If the Hyoff clan scandal had not been revealed, Sang One would have gone to great lengths to capture all of them. However, he only had enough time to capture one. His name was Baekjio.O, wasn't it? I was most curious about Li Chang, Sun and Baekjio.O. I can't tell where on earth they disappeared to, though. It would be for the best if I could monitor him and take him along. Sang One was a little disappointed, but the test subject was still extremely talented. No, he was actually better than most test subjects Sang One had captured through the training sessions. It was just that he could not help but compare the specimen to Li Chang. Sun due to Chang.Sun's sheer fame. Phew. Sang One finally heaved a sigh of relief after making a rough sketch of his plan, telling himself to calm down now that things had already turned out this way. He planned to wait for only 1 hour. If Executive Director O did not provide him with any solutions within the hour, he would leave the lab immediately. Why haven't the guys I sent out to retrieve the Dream Sphere returned? Sang One asked suddenly. Seemingly having gathered his wits after deciding on a plan, he frowned, realizing that the 2 subordinates he had sent out to kill the Jigui this morning were nowhere to be found. I'll order someone to quickly investigate the matter, his subordinate stuttered. Move quickly before the inspection department members find out about this. If they do, we'll be in more trouble. Sang One yelled. Why? Yes, sir, his subordinate replied, hurriedly exiting the lab director's room. Although Sang One had made his subordinate a ghost soldier using a dream sphere, the man was somehow a worse worker than other ghost soldiers. Grit. Sang One subconsciously chewed on his fingernails after gritting his teeth, an indication of how nervous he was despite the fact that he had reassured himself many times over. *****, the skill, Wind's Talking Tiger, has been activated. Chang-Sun ran quickly toward the research facility, leaving only traces of dust and wind in his wake instead of footsteps. Although it had not been long since he acquired the skill, he was already using Wind's Talking Tiger with great proficiency. However, he was not heading directly to the lab called Silver Tiger or Gold Tiger or something. Instead, he was heading to the Jigui's nest, which was on the way to the research facility. A Jigui couple only lays 1 egg every 100 years. Chang-Sun recalled. He had no clue whether the 2 Jigui's offspring had already hatched or not. In the former case, he would simply take the hatchling's fire and jewelry, just as he had done to its parents. Although he was a little saddened by the thought of killing a baby bird, letting such a bird loose would certainly cause substantial damage. However, in the latter case, I'll take the offspring. Jigwis looked like birds, but were clusters of spirits. That meant they were spectral beings without fixed shapes. They had simply chosen to look like birds for no reason other than following the habits of their ancient ancestors, which meant they could change into other forms depending on the environment they grew up in. It was even possible to train them to have a good nature, and the owner could bestow them a certain level of intelligence. I really want to have the offspring, because there's a possibility that it can become a mythical creature, no, a divine creature, Chang Sun thought, smiling faintly. As the offspring had the fire attribute, it would be best if it grew up to be a fire-type divine creature. Perhaps it could become a phoenix that could rise from the ashes multiple times, or a phantom dragon that fed on illusions. It could even become a Bulgasari, considering its death attribute. However, it did not matter what the offspring grew into, Chang Sun was confident that he could get any result he wanted after hatching the egg. Besides, he had also become a Jigwi, so raising a Jigwi would not be a problem. I'll have to decide after checking on the egg's condition. Chang Sun concluded. Depending on how close it was to hatching, the potential options Chang Sun had to choose from for the offspring would vary greatly. The celestial abyss, chasing great devil, is interested. The celestial Twilight, piercing owl, wishes for a righteous divine creature that resembles you to hatch from the egg. The two deities reacted with interest, realizing what Chang Sun had planned just from seeing where he was heading. As usual, Minerva misunderstood Chang Sun very nicely, but Mephistopheles unexpectedly revealed a different reaction. Even after Chang Sun had rejected him in the Choose a Guardian scenario quest, Mephistopheles had just continued to watch without saying anything. Although Chang Sun was unsure why Mephistopheles was acting that way, he had moved on without paying much attention to it, as no one could tell what Mephistopheles was truly thinking. The Jigwi's nest has been found. It was not difficult to locate the nest's exact location. Chang Sun simply had to follow his gut feeling. The area near the nest was covered with scorch marks, as well as piles of half-eaten monster corpses. His nostrils filled with the stench of rotting corpses, Chang Sun drove the nameless spear into the ground just as Bek Jio had done. Boom! The ground was overturned several times, revealing an egg buried beneath it. Like the Jigwis, the egg was quite large, the size of a human torso. I found it. Jigwi egg, the egg laid by a Jigwi couple. It looks as if it will take a while to hatch. Type: egg. Ingredient: effect. Hatch demonic creature. Bestow attribute star. Asterisk if it is used as an ingredient. After examining the Jigwi egg from multiple angles, Chang Sun's eyes shone. The pattern on the egg's shell was vivid, and the shell itself was also firm. On top of that, when he examined it with viper eyes, the entire egg shone with a bright blue light, which meant the Jigwi couple had taken very good care of it. Its power balance, growth status, and health. The egg is in perfect condition. It'll be best to raise the egg into a divine bird. There was a divine bird called the Yuktiakwi. It resembled an eagle, and flew as swiftly as a hawk. However, it was so large that a person could ride on it, and powerful enough that it could hunt the king of the mountain, the tiger. The Yuktiakwi ate evil creatures and stopped misfortune. As it fed on the energy of death, it only did good things for humans, saving any beings who ought to live and devouring all those who ought not to. Thus, Yuktiakwis were normally found on battlefields, as they brought victory to the righteous and defeat to the wicked. They were also known for blessing warriors and cheering for heroes, acting as guides to the underworld whenever those warriors and heroes died. In many ways, a Yuktiakwi was a perfect divine bird for Chang Sun, who moved constantly from battle to battle collecting lives. Whenever a Yuktiakwi encountered a tiger, it would swoop down on the tiger's head to enjoy a delicacy, the tiger's eyes. That made Chang Sun like the bird even more, as he was trying to hunt a tiger named Hyoju. The celestial, calamity tiger, is curious as to what kind of creature you will hatch the egg into. The celestial, calamity tiger, advises that it would be better if the egg hatched into a rare wild animal type creature, especially a tiger type, instead of a nasty winged animal type. Although Chang Sun inwardly mocked Hyoju, he outwardly bowed in Hyoju's direction as if he were grateful for a blessing. The celestial, a good season to hunt objects to calamity tiger's opinion. The celestial, a good season to hunt, advises that a hawk or a hound type creature is the best match for a natural born hunter such as you. The celestial, a good season to hunt, advises that a Borome or a Inshan Tiango would be a good match for you. Surprisingly, she decided to speak up. Chang Sun thought. A Borome was a bird of prey type mythical creature that was known to accurately read its master's mind, and a Inshan Tiango was a dog type monster that stopped unfortunate events from happening with its calming howl. It was said that a little knowledge could be a dangerous thing, but sometimes a person would say the right thing even with such little knowledge. That was what Pabelsag was doing at the moment. Of course, however, Hyoju would never think of such a thing. The celestial, calamity tiger, snorts, saying that such creatures are mere snacks for him. The celestial, a good season to hunt, glares at calamity tiger for making fun of her friends. The celestial, calamity tiger bares his fangs and stares at her, asking what she will do about it. The celestial, a good season to hunt, searches her belongings to find arrows. The two celestials' relationship is worsening very quickly. The other celestials who watched Chang Sun usually did not care what Pabelsag babbled about, but Hyoju was different. Due to his greedy and violent nature, he never left anyone who challenged him alone. Even though he was going against the primordial evil dragon, Tiamat's daughter, he seemed not to care. Birds of a feather flock together. Chang Sun thought without paying much attention to the deity's fight. In any event, he had no reason to waste time, as he had obtained such a good egg. Swish. Chang Sun hurried onward to the secret tiger lab. 1. Gildal, is a dakibi, supernatural creatures often likened to Korean goblins, that appears in the text Samguk Yusa, but depending on the source, he is also occasionally described as a ghost or monster. 2. Chang Sun is talking about the secret tiger lab. This is Korean wordplay. Has various meanings, such as secret, silver, etc. 3. Also called Bulgasel, this is an unkillable monster from Korean mythology that can provide protection against disasters and fire. 4. This is actually a Korean term for a baby hawk, but the novel uses it to refer to a mythical creature. Chapter 53. Star, The Dream, 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Have I arrived? Chang Sun wondered. After running for some time, he realized that the air around him had completely changed at some point. Beast Senses is reacting strongly. Due to the influence of the Jigwe's territory, the air had been hot and dry. Now, however, he was met with a damp and gloomy sensation, akin to what he had felt when he first walked through the underworld. No, the air is similar, but it's different, Chang Sun thought, shaking his head. Although the underworld's air had a hint of gloominess, he had not found it unpleasant. In fact, the air in the underworld had been comforting, as if it were meant to reassure the dead who felt lost. However, the air in this place was completely different. He sensed danger and tension, along with something foul. Negative emotions, such as grudges, betrayal, resentment, and regret, formed a complex cocktail in the air. If the Hoan Mama Chang Sun had sensed from the dream sphere, were to be described in terms of emotions, it would feel precisely like that. It indicated that many people had died nearby. Most people would shudder and tense up as soon as they entered, but not Chang Sun. He beamed, thinking, good for me. The celestial, Calamity Tiger, is having fun, saying you take after him. The Celestial, a good season to hunt, says, Calamity Tiger, is being ridiculous and claims you are brave like her. The Celestial, Calamity Tiger, advises, a good season to hunt to go home and sleep if she is planning to continue speaking nonsense. The Celestial, a good season to hunt, smirks, retorting that it would be better for him to shut up because his breath stinks when he speaks. Sparks are flying between the two Celestials. While Hyoju and Pabelsag's relationship continued to sour, and they bickered with each other. I've arrived. Chang. Sun realized after heading deeper into the gloomy mountain. His eyes shone when he saw a large research complex sprawling across the vast highland. The facility was heavily guarded, patrolled constantly by intimidating-looking players. Surveillance artifacts and emergency traps were installed in various spots. It was clear that the facility was top-secret. Your concealment skill has been activated. All the sounds you make disappear into the wind. Quickly altering the properties of Wind's Talking Tiger, Chang Sun began his attempt to sneak into the facility. I'd better figure out the facility's structure before I begin to attack. After coming up with a plan, he crossed over the wall with a single leap, seizing the opportunity when the front gate guards were distracted by conversation. Ha! What's wrong? Well, I felt as if someone passed by just now. Who would pass by here? I might be mistaken. Hey, cut the bullshit. Because I'm already scared shitless. What are you going to do if someone really appears? You're right. Phew. I was too nervous because of the inspection department. Paying little heed to the guard's conversation, Chang Sun quickly crossed the research complex, nimbly jumping from rooftop to rooftop. Trap number 12 has been activated. The skill, Beast Senses, detects the activated trap's location. The trap failed to detect you. The skill, the Viper Eyes, has been activated, swiftly scanning for other traps installed nearby. The skill, Wind's Talking Tiger, has been applied to Viper Eyes. Skill level increased. Trap number 27 has been activated. Successfully avoided the surveillance trap. While using Beast Senses to avoid any surveillance traps, Chang Sun scanned for other traps with Viper Eyes to prepare for any possible danger. The Celestial World Encircling Serpent exclaims lightly in surprise as he watches how you use your skills. Due to both skills, Chang Sun quickly reached the center of the complex. Did something happen? Why is everyone so busy? He wondered. He could tell that an accident had occurred within the research complex. Many people in lab coats and instructor uniforms were running around the complex frantically, their faces pale as they held bundles of documents. At first, Chang Sun thought that perhaps he had been discovered. However, judging from the documents they were holding, that did not seem to be the case. How could he describe the situation? It was similar to something he had experienced in Arcadia. While he had been resting in an army barracks, commissioned and non-commissioned officers alike had suddenly begun running around just like these people, because some superiors from military high command had suddenly announced that they were going to conduct an inspection. Is someone coming? Chang Sun's eyes shone as he used Beast Senses to strengthen his hearing. The range of his hearing expanded, and the faint voices in the area became as loud as thunder. Beast Senses has sharpened your hearing. Detecting nearby sounds. Fuck. Why are they coming while we're busy as hell? Get rid of this stuff quickly. We'll be dead meat if they figure anything out. I don't want to become a test subject when we've been the ones conducting the experiments. Shit. Bring that over here. Take that over. They were all busy cursing, venting their anger, and shouting. Although most of it was unhelpful nonsense, Chang Sun filtered and sorted through the information he had gathered to get what he needed. We're swamped with work, so why aren't the guys who went off to kill the Jigui returning? We really need to retrieve the Dream Sphere. Shit. Those guys working in the field are such slowpokes. What really happened? Fuck, we're screwed. Why, L.RG, what happened? The Management Bureau just sent an emergency message about how the Jigwis were found dead just now. What? What are you talking about? The guys who went out didn't report any. You idiot. How can you not tell that other people took out the Jigwis already? What? Who could possibly kill Jigwis? How can we know if it's possible or not? Fuck. We already received a report about how the Hyoff clan's demonic players secretly infiltrated the training institute. What's going on? Well, it's about time they found out. Sun thought with a nod. Two powerful boss monsters had suddenly disappeared, so it was actually surprising that they had just found out now. However, it seemed the chaos in the research facility was not simply because of the Jigwi incident. Thus, Sun paid close attention to their chatter, and soon, he heard something interesting. Take care of the stuff inside before the inspection department members barge in. Got it. Sun thought, instinctively realizing that he had found what he had been looking for, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Any organization and country would fear an inspection. Naturally, a clan the size of the White Tiger clan feared such a thing too. If the inspecting department was about to visit a facility, that facility's staff would naturally try to bury any information they wanted to hide as deep as they could. Whether that information was about their performance, or embezzlement, or something else, they would become the facility staff's weakness. Thus, Sun followed the men who had just spoken up. At a glance, he could already tell that the men were in a hurry to enter the most heavily guarded building, which reeked of dream spheres. That's the Dream Sphere manufacturing line. Sun realized in an instant as he entered the building, sticking close to the men and slipping in right before the gate closed. A strong smell of poisonous herbs fills the building. Crying flower toxin has entered your body. Laughing flower toxin has begun causing seizures. The Hoenn Mama has targeted you. The effect, 10 toxin immunity, has been applied, successfully purifying all the toxins. I'm feeling lightheaded. How much medicine are they making? Sun thought, lightly clicking his tongue as he passed by the men who were running around busily. In order to locate the Hoenn Mama, he followed the scent of dream spheres, which grew stronger the deeper he went. Hurry. Come on. Move that over here. After moving past the researchers, Sun finally reached an iron door that was locked up tightly, unlike the other rooms he had seen. The door is securely locked. Unauthorized personnel. Enter the correct pattern or password to unlock the gate. When Sun pressed his hand against the door, a screen appeared in front of him, making him narrow his eyes. He wondered, how do I open it? He looked around, hoping someone would enter the door, but the researchers were not even looking in its direction. It seemed only a few selected personnel could enter the area. I wonder, are there any administrators like Harold wandering around somewhere? Sun thought. Of course, that thought was just a bit of nonsense. Even if he could call on an administrator the way he had with Harold, he had no leverage he could use against them. Squinting, he thought, it looks as if I could get through if I wanted to. For a moment, the thought of breaking through the iron door using Jigwi's phantom body crossed his mind, but that plan would only be valid if he decided to wreak havoc in the facility. Sun still had to figure out the secret the research facility members were trying to hide, which could be used as leverage against Executive Director O. If he caused chaos before he discovered the secret, there was a chance he would be unable to find it at all, as he would be too busy fighting against the research facility members. Thus, he considered searching other rooms first. No, this has to be the place. Sun thought, shaking his head. He had a strong gut feeling that something was inside the room. It made no sense to move past it without checking. A password, huh? He thought, putting his brain to work. What kind of password would they use? As they would not want their security to be weak, they would naturally use a very difficult password. As he racked his brains, suddenly, boom! He felt something vibrating against his neck. Ha! He thought, unsure what was going on, but he could tell that Peter's key was reacting. He wondered whether it would be okay to pull out the key while Hyoju was watching him. A thought suddenly crossed his mind. He reached out toward the touch screen, and Master ID has been confirmed. Unlocking the devices and opening the door. Suddenly glowing brightly, the touch screen displayed new messages, and the tightly shut iron door opened up. Chung-sun reflexively said out loud. The lock used a very complicated encryption system, but it had been unlocked very easily. Chung-sun could not tell how it had been opened. Perhaps, Peter's key was connected to the 7 cryptical books of San, or had a secret of its own. Regardless of the reason, Chung-sun was not about to leave when the door had conveniently been opened. The celestial Calamity Tiger is a bit perplexed to see the device suddenly being unlocked. The celestial Calamity Tiger wonders whether you have a for unlocking things. The celestial world encircling serpent asks if Calamity Tiger still cannot tell what happened, clicking his tongue. The celestial Calamity Tiger asks what world encircling serpent means by that. The celestial world encircling serpent says you are capable of doing so because you are more cunning than a nest of serpents. The celestial Calamity Tiger says world encircling serpent has a point, nodding. The celestial Calamity Tiger exclaims that you are not only brave, but also smart. The celestial Calamity Tiger desires you more. Surely, Hyoju doesn't know I have Peter's key. But what do they mean by that? Chung-sun thought, tilting his head in confusion. Hyoju had fought fiercely with Pablesag, but strangely, he seemed to get along with J. Rumungendra on some level. Besides, why would J. Rumungendra, a real serpent, call Chung-sun a serpent? Although he felt somewhat dumbfounded, Chung-sun showed none of his confusion as he entered the depths of the lab. Shortly after he entered. So this was their secret. Chung-sun's expression turned grim as he saw an empty room, in which dozens of people were standing still in a military formation. As if they had become mannequins, their eyes were all vacant. They wore sturdy armor and helmets and held sharp-edged weapons, emanating more violent and wicked ghost energy than the Jigwis. They looked more like weapons than people. At that moment, Chung-sun could tell that the people before him were the invincible soldiers created using dream spheres, that the Hyoff clan's demonic player had told him about, the ones who lost their souls and were possessed by starlight. Bei Wu Jiang had said that the White Tiger clan called them ghost soldiers, soldiers who had become like ghosts. Growling. The ghost energy emanating from the ghost soldiers ravaged the area. The Hoenn Mama rages within the area. The celestial Calamity Tiger smiles wickedly as he sees his fangs and claws lined up. Chapter 54. Star, The Dream, 4, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Disgusting. Chung-sun thought after observing the army of ghost soldiers. After the Hoenn Mama overtook them, people lost their rationality and ego, turning into mere dolls to be unleashed on the world as killing machines. As Chung-sun knew how horrible it was to have one's free will taken away, he was bound to feel that way. He was naturally annoyed by Hyoju, the one responsible for what was happening. Song Yu-jun said they would just be given new egos afterward. These people only exist now as soulless dolls. The celestial Twilight piercing owl is very displeased to see the current sight. The celestial Twilight piercing owl scowls at Calamity Tiger. The celestial Calamity Tiger smirks at her, asking what she is going to do. Minerva had not even been hostile toward Mephistopheles, but the sight before her left her outraged. From what had happened in Bestla's tomb up until now, Minerva had taken great issue with everything related to Hyoju. However, Hyoju acted shamelessly, taunting Minerva by asking what she would do to act on her hostility. The celestial, Twilight, piercing owl, explodes with anger, desperately pleading with you to execute justice on her behalf. Just as she always did, Minerva bitterly asked Chang's son to resolve the situation, saddened by the fact that she could not take care of the incident herself due to the restrictions of causality. A sudden quest, the owl's plea, has been created. The owl's plea, type. Sudden quest. Explanation. Twilight, piercing owl, is greatly disappointed by Calamity Tiger, who only brings deep chaos and darkness to the Saha world at present. She is also saddened to see that many lives are being held hostage. Thus, Twilight, piercing owl, strongly pleads with you to bring peace to those people on her behalf. Prerequisites. Quest recipient. Time limit. Objectives. 1. Eliminate all the ghost soldiers. 2. Annihilate the Dream Sphere manufacturing facility, the place that created the ghost soldiers in the first place. Reward. A blessing from Twilight, piercing owl, that will be chosen based on the level of your performance. She's going this far. Chang's son thought, slightly agape. No matter how angry Minerva was with Hyoju, Chang's son had not thought she would actively give out a quest to stop him. On top of that, she was offering Chang's son a pretty good reward. She's saying that she'll give me a different blessing depending on how well I complete the tasks. Is she willing to give me an authority, too? Chang's son thought half-jokingly, but somehow, he had a feeling that it would not be so impossible. Thus, it made sense to accept the quest. However, there was a problem. The celestial, Calamity Tiger, is very curious as to what you will choose. I'll be on bad terms with Hyoju if I accept this. Chang's son thought. It was a problem, as his plan to get as close as possible to Hyoju by winning his favor would be disrupted as a result. I'll be burning bridges with Minerva if I reject this, though. In truth, Chang's son had nothing to lose even if he turned down Minerva's request. Minerva's bonus rewards, Unbending Spirit, and Composed Spirit, would disappear, but he had other skills to substitute for them. Still, he felt bitter about the thought of letting one of his sugar deities go just like that, and he was reluctant to give up when he could potentially even receive an authority. In the end, he had to choose one of two particularly risky options. Fuck. Chang's son thought. The celestial, Twilight, piercing owl, fixes her gaze on you. Even as Minerva strongly urged Chang's son to accept the quest, he prepared to reject it, feeling that he had no other choice. However, an idea suddenly flashed through his mind. Don't I just have to act uncertain in front of them? Besides, these two deities need me to a similar extent. Chang's son concluded. Smiling faintly, he asked Hyoju, I would like to ask Calamity Tiger, who wishes to become my guardian, one thing. The celestial, Calamity Tiger willingly accepts your request. I'm sure you're already well aware of why I'm here, Chang's son began. The celestial, Calamity Tiger orders you to cut to the chase, as he indeed knows very well. I'm planning to snatch up everything in this place right now, because I have zero intention of letting others have what I can't have. What does Calamity Tiger think about my choice? Chang's son politely asked. In short, he was telling Hyoju that he would take as much as he needed from the research facility as he could, then burn the rest. If Hyoju disliked Chang's son's choice, they would have no choice but to part ways. Hyoju is already paying a lot of attention to me, the most desirable priest candidate, so he won't just give up on me. Chang's son thought. Hyoju was the kind of deity who would swallow something he wanted before thinking twice, even if that something was poison. Thus, Chang's son thought Hyoju would only be more intrigued and continue to watch him if he acted that way. The celestial, Calamity Tiger, laughs inadvertently, realizing what you are arrogantly trying to pull. The celestial, Calamity Tiger says he likes your attitude despite everything, and concludes that his subordinates would be the stupid ones if they were killed by you. The celestial, Calamity Tiger promises that he will not interfere while you fulfill your ambition. A sudden quest, the Tiger's Plunder, has been created. The Tiger's Plunder, type. Sudden quest. Explanation. Calamity Tiger strongly desires to watch you, his new priest candidate, grow stronger. However, he warns you that he will punish you severely if you fail to meet his expectations, as he has been watching you with interest. Prerequisites. Quest recipient. Time limit. Objectives. 1. Just as you have declared to the deity, pillage everything before you. 2. Consume all your trophies perfectly. Penalty. Divine punishment. Reward. 1. The right to keep your trophies. 2. A blessing from Calamity Tiger that will be chosen based on the level of your performance. I got him. Chang Sun thought in satisfaction. Seeing as even Hyoju had given out a quest, Chang Sun had basically received a blank check. I've taken care of Hyoju, so how are you going to react, Minerva? Chang Sun thought, waiting patiently. In truth, Chang Sun had put on the whole performance for Minerva, not Hyoju, as if to ask whether he could use whatever method he desired to finish her quest. The celestial, Twilight, piercing owl, delightedly says that she knew you would make such a decision. It seemed Minerva was actually rejoicing in the fact that Chang Sun would diligently carry out her quest. She's definitely a simpleton, Chang Sun thought as the corners of his lips curled up in satisfaction. Accepted the sudden quest, the owl's plea. Your range of objectives has increased, as the two sudden quests, the owl's plea, the tiger's plunder, have been merged. Eliminate all the ghost soldiers and any related facilities from now on. As Chang Sun had gotten a better result than he originally intended, he moved without any hesitation, feeling pleased. Next. He thought, deciding to examine the room to try to find any hidden passageways. Who's there? Someone suddenly yelled from behind, causing Chang Sun to look backward. Your concealment skill has been deactivated. Chang Sun saw two players looking at him sharply, their eyes wide. Even at first glance, he could tell they were no ordinary players, their levels seemed to be higher than the two instructors he had met in the Jigwee's nest. It seemed they had visited to take care of business amid the chaos and detected Chang Sun's presence. Chang Sun's mastery and skill level of Wind's Talking Tiger were low, which meant his Wind's Talking Tiger appeared very sloppy in the eyes of the two players, who were at higher levels than Chang Sunday. I've dragged things out too much. Chang Sun thought, lightly clicking his tongue. The players had caught him before he could completely figure out Executive Director O's secret. Seeing that he had no other choice, he powered up his magic integrated circuit. In truth, the thought that he would need to create chaos to find what he needed had already crossed his mind. It was said that it was easier to catch a fish in muddy waters. The Ian fire of the 8 trigrams brazier is blazing. The title, Jigwee's Phantom Body, has been applied. Whoosh! Fire blazed outward from Chang Sun's feet, spreading out to create several vortexes. Giant Jigwee wings sprouted from his back as the black and red flame vortexes swirled and cast sparks. What? Why is it Jigwee's fire? The two players could not finish their sentences, as they were instantly destroyed by the firestorm created when Chang Sun flapped his fiery wings. Even before they could scream, they were reduced to ash, not leaving a single trace of blood. Only black scorch marks remained in the spot where they had been as the flames spread across the entire room in a flash. I feel as if things are somehow turning out similarly to how they did in Bestla's tomb. Chang Sun thought. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A firestorm rages in the room. The ghost soldiers standing by, of whom there were over 100, were immediately engulfed by the firestorm. Asterisk 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 boom. Boom. Rumble. In the blink of an eye, the research lab exploded, engulfed in flames. It started with the ground suddenly shaking, and an explosion that was so loud it almost deafened those nearby filled the air. Thus, despite how busy they were, the facility's staff looked in the direction where the explosion had come from. However, the firestorm suddenly spread through the research complex, destroying everything in its way. As most herbs and facilities related to the dream spheres were highly flammable, the facility's staff had fireproofed everything, but the firestorm was completely unaffected. Fire. There's a fire. The Central Research Wing is on fire. Hurry. Come on. We can't put it out. What's going? Aerg. Don't get too close. Use an ice spell from far away. The second explosion reduced those who had hurried to put out the fire to ashes, or buried them alive as the ground collapsed. Third and fourth explosions soon followed one after another, causing the entire complex to fall into complete mayhem. No matter how much they used ice-type magic spells and skills, the fire only grew larger and spread more fiercely, rising higher rather than subsiding. Explosions continued to happen unceasingly, shaking the mountain range and creating earthquakes violent enough to cause avalanches. The black smoke in the air turned into a tornado that filled the air. What's going on? Lab Director Sang, one stuttered, leaping out of his office with a pale face after belatedly realizing what was going on. Tongues of crimson flame greedily swallowed up the Central Research Wing where all the important facilities were, including the Dream Sphere, manufacturing lines and the Ghost Soldier Depository. If the Central Wing collapsed, the decade of effort the White Tiger clan had spent would go to waste. However, Lab Director Sang.1's biggest problem was that the vessel, his last hope, was there. What are the guards doing? How on earth did they let? Lab Director Sang.1 yelled. Boom, boom, boom. Rumble. Another explosion followed, sending a large amount of shrapnel flying through the air. The players who failed to avoid the fragments died on the spot, and some of the researchers hurriedly escaped the research complex in fear. Lab Director. You alright? Lab Director Sang.1's subordinate asked, coming to his aid. Lab Director Sang.1 had barely managed to survive by instinctively diving toward the ground, his face turning so white that his subordinate could see his smallest blood vessels. Imagining what would happen if the facility and the vessel were both destroyed, Lab Director Sang.1 clenched his teeth, as he had no way to survive if his worst fears came true. Director Gwon was scheduled to arrive soon. In order to survive, Lab Director Sang.1 was prepared to use any means necessary. Even if he could not necessarily save the ghost soldiers, he had to save the vessel. Thus, he quickly grabbed his subordinate, who was right next to him, and asked, How many? How many men do we have left? That's, his subordinate stuttered. Speak. Now. Lab Director Sang.1 yelled, his eyes burning with madness. 1. This is a saying that appears in the 30.6 stratagems. When the water becomes muddy, the fish loses its sense of direction and is disoriented, making it easier for the fisherman to catch it. Chapter 55. The Dream, 5, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Shit. What in the world should I do? Do I really have to go in there? At Lab Director Sang.1's urging, over 20 guards from the vicinity all gathered together. Considering how there had been more than 50 guards before, more than half of their number had been massacred after getting caught up in the fire or had escaped. The remaining guards strongly regretted gathering together. Everyone, follow me to the Central Research Wing. Anyone who doesn't want to go in, step forward so I can break your neck myself. Lab Director Sang.1 growled. Although Lab Director Sang.1 had the title Research Lab Director, he had been acting as Executive Director O's loyal dog for quite a while, so he was naturally skilled at combat. Thus, it would not be particularly strange if he killed the guards on the spot for refusing his orders. Rumble. Boom. How am I supposed to go in there? I'm going to die either way. Watching the explosions continuously rocking the central research wing, the guards could barely suppress their desire to refuse Lab Director Sang.1's order. To ordinary people, players looked like superhumans, but in truth, players were still human and could die in dangerous situations. Naturally, they were reluctant to move toward a hell where they could die at any minute. However, as you may already know, the Ghost Soldier Depository is in that wing, so what do you think will happen if the Ghost Soldiers all disappear? Won't the higher-ups reprimand you? There's no guarantee that your families won't be affected by this, no. Lab Director Sang.1 reminded the guards. The guards trembled, forced to face the cruel reality before them. All the secret Tiger Lab personnel's families were held hostage by the White Tiger clan as a confidential security measure. Although the clan provided a high salary and a good benefits plan to inspire loyalty among them, the fact that their families could be in danger remained. Thus, what would happen if the Ghost Soldiers, which the White Tiger clan had created at great expense, were lost in the fire? Creating one Ghost Soldier required a minimum of a year and an astronomical amount of money, so the White Tiger clan was bound to be outraged and reprimand them, just as Lab Director Sang.1 warned. If that happened, their families would surely be in danger, which meant they had to bite the bullet and follow orders. What are you doing? Get moving. Lab Director Sang.1 yelled, browbeating the dispirited guards to stop them from having second thoughts. Like a herd of cattle being dragged to a slaughterhouse, the guards moved toward the central research wing. Previously, the guards had prepared all kinds of fireproof defensive equipment and armed themselves to the teeth. After some time, their despairing expressions brightened somewhat, the fire had noticeably weakened as if it knew they were about to enter. The flames were still strong, but no further explosions occurred, which was enough to allow the guards to infiltrate the facility. We're going in right now. Lab Director Sang.1 ordered. The guards slowly entered the central research wing in a single file. Step. Step. Waddling like penguins due to their thick defensive equipment, the guards were all connected to each other by tethers in case of emergencies. It was a safety measure to prevent one of them from being swept away without warning. Lab Director Sang.1 followed them from the back of the line. The guards in the front believed the director was using them as cannon fodder to ensure his safety. However, the real reason he stood in the back was that he was planning to immediately head to the secret research lab where the vessel was hidden if things went south. Maybe this is for the best. If I disappear in a place like this, the clan will think I died, so I'll try to wrap things up as much as possible and make it seem as if I died in an accident. While the clan sorts out the incident, I'll take it and run away overseas. Lab Director Sang.1 thought, barely managing to hold in his laughter at the thought that his misfortune had turned into a fortune. Of course, that happy scenario would only be possible if the vessel, the thing Executive Director O and Lab Director Sang.1 called, was intact, so he could not let his guard down. Why? Why is it so dark in here? Shit, it's so freaking hot in here. Cough. Cough. Shit, there's too much dust. Everyone, be careful when you breathe, the guard in the lead yelled. Moving in single file like a train, the guards frowned as they slowly entered the central research wing. There was nothing intact inside the area. The hallways they had previously been running around busily were covered with scorch marks, and most of the research rooms had collapsed. The bulkheads that were supposed to block fires had been destroyed. Rebar peeked dangerously through the gaps in the ceilings. The entire wing looked dangerous, as if it could collapse at any minute, making the guards even more nervous. Still, the hallways were relatively intact apart from the scorch marks, which meant they were still somehow able to head toward the Ghost Soldier Depository. You have been poisoned with fire toxin. Fire, toxin, the leading guard muttered, widening his eyes when he saw the message suddenly appear. No matter how much fire filled an area, it would rarely create fire toxin, a substance that was mostly created by fire-type monsters. In order to be poisoned by fire toxin, the guards had to have been constantly exposed to a substantial amount of it, so it was natural for them to wonder. Until now, they had not seen a single fire-type monster, let alone being bitten by them, thus, the message would make no sense, unless they had breathed in a lot of fire toxin from surroundings filled with it. Breathed. The guard thought. A shiver ran down his spine, from the top of his aching head to the tips of his toes. Warning. The area is full of fire toxin. You are advised to leave immediately. No, the guard began to yell desperately, when he saw the new message, trying to warn the others that this place was a trap. It seemed a fire-type monster with high intelligence had appeared, and the lab had practically become its den. However, he had no time to finish his warning. The first message disappeared in a flash, replaced by several others. The amount of fire toxin accumulated in your body has greatly exceeded the permissible limit. You have inhaled too much fire energy. A spark has been lit, detonating the accumulated fire toxin. The Ian fire has exploded. Arg. The guard shouted in pain as one word caught his attention: exploded. That meant he was on fire. The fire toxin that had accumulated within his lungs instantly detonated, burning up his body from the inside. Mouth, nose, ears. Every orifice of his body shone with red light, and black smoke billowed out. W.1.ho. F.Fire. Why was he set on fire so suddenly? Idiot. Cut the tether first. The guard who was closest to the burning guard moved around anxiously, but he came to his senses when he heard a voice from behind. As he had previously thought the tether was only there to prevent anyone from being left behind, he was slow to react. By the time he tried to cut the tether with his dagger, the fire had already reached him. The Ian fire has exploded. Arf, the second guard yelled in pain. It was inevitable that they would be exposed to fire toxin, as the substance that permeated the entire place was the Jigwee's Ian fire. Thus, the second guard had also unwittingly breathed in a lot of fire toxin in the central research wing. Of course, even a small ember was sufficient to cause the fire toxin to combust. Save me. Save me. Erg. What are you doing? Cut the tether first. But the tether is too sturdy. Ugh. Aw. The fire is spreading here. Why don't the artifacts work? One by one, the guards were quickly ignited by Ian fire through the chain. The fireproof defensive equipment did not seem to help at all, leaving the people in the back even more terrified. As their bodies themselves were combusting due to the fire toxin's explosions, the entire process bypassed the defensive equipment's abilities, but they were too frightened out of their senses to realize that fact. They could do nothing but try to run away, but the tethers they had brought to avoid leaving anyone behind were hard to cut. In the end, the guards were only able to escape after sacrificing 7 of their number to the fire. No. Why, am I also? Ugh. The dying guards resentfully watched their colleagues, who had abandoned them and fled. However, the ones who barely managed to survive could not regain their composure, because another disaster abruptly came after them. Arg. Jayun. What's happening this time? Why did he disappear? One of the guards disappeared while standing right beside the others, causing one of his colleagues to look for him. However, the second guard also disappeared mid-sentence as if he had been snatched up by a bird of prey, leaving behind only a deep bloodstain that evaporated quickly in the blazing heat. Swoosh. Whenever the sound of wind passed by, one of the guards disappeared. Fuck. As the situation unfolded, the remaining guards became more anxious, finally realizing that the fire was due to arson, not an accident. The suspect had been silently waiting for the guards to enter the research wing, only moving when the opportunity arose. Where are you? Show yourself. The guards all drew their weapons and pointed them outward. Although they were not rankers, they had worked as proud instructors of the White Tiger clan, so they could confidently say they were quite strong. Thus, now that they had grasped the situation, they planned to catch the rat using human wave tactics. However, the problem was that no matter how much they sharpened their senses, they could not perceive anything. The fire surrounding them prevented them from sensing anything properly, and the fear that slowly eroded their mental state was difficult to get rid of. Fear is running rampant. You have entered the mass panic state. Fires are raging. The current situation rendered the guards powerless. Meanwhile, rough gusts of wind struck them several times, and the fire next to their feet flared up fiercely, greedily trying to swallow them whole. Slash, slash. Splat. Rumble. There had been over 20 guards, but many of them died one by one, unable to fight back. Heads fell to the ground one after another, and their bodies were engulfed in fire. Just then. Swoosh. I doubt it's coming again. The wind that had relentlessly taken their lives approached once again. Clash. Suddenly, however, someone blocked the path of the wind. The remaining guards turned to look in its direction and saw Lab Director Sang one blocking something with his sword, gritting his teeth. Noel.n in front of the director stood a man clad in the black and red fire that filled the area, taking the form of armor and a pair of wings. The man's eyes were wide, as if he had not expected his attacks to be blocked. He remarked, "You're good." Who are you? Who sent you? Was it the Hyoff clan? How in the world are you controlling the Jigwee's Ian fire? Lab Director Sang one let out a barrage of questions as he glared at the man. The intruder had taken away the lab, which was everything to Lab Director Sang. So he could never let the man live. However, one of the guards behind Lab Director Sang answered his question first. Lee Chong. Sunday, a guard yelled, quickly recognizing Chong. Sunday. What? He's Lee Chong. Sunday. Lab Director Sang exclaimed, his expression stiffening as he also gradually recognized Chong. Sunday. He had never thought Chong, Sun, whom he had identified as the strongest candidate for the Gildal project, would be the one to destroy the lab. Wait, then. Lab Director Sang suddenly thought, deciding to change his plan from killing Chong, Sun to subduing him. I'll just make him into a Gildal too. Lab Director Sang did not know Chong. Sun's identity, purpose, or reasons for destroying the lab. He did not even know how Chong, Sun was handling the Jigwee's Ian fire, but he could tell that the man's ability was far more exceptional than he had expected, enough that it was worth ignoring all the unanswered questions. What if he could make such a talented person into a Gildal? He could say for certain that he would no longer have anything to be afraid of in this world. In at most 5 years, he could build a clan that was as large as the White Tiger clan. Flash. At that moment, Yang Sang stared at Chong, Sun, his eyes burning with greed and a desire to never let Chong, Sun go. Glancing at the guard who had said his name, Chong, Sun retreated, lightly clicking his tongue. He planned to use the concealment skill to disappear again, because he would be at a disadvantage if he fought them head-on. Whoosh! A stream of Ian fire that stretched downward from Chong. Sun's wings like a tail drew a line between Chong, Sun and the director. Where are you going? Lab Director Sang yelled, seemingly unwilling to ever give up on Chong. Sunday. He continued to approach Chong, Sun, seemingly unhindered by the dangerously flaring Ian fire. The skill, Wind's Talking Tiger, has been forcibly cancelled. The concealment skill has failed. After the skill's abrupt cancellation, Chong, Sun held Tiamat Snaggletooth up to block Lab Director Sang.1's attack, which was about to cut his head in half vertically. Boom! Rumble! Tiamat's Snaggletooth shook fiercely as if it would shatter at any moment. Although the weapons clashing were made of metal, the guards heard an explosion fill the air. Shattered fragments of Tiger Kill scattered everywhere, leaving claw marks across the floor. The Hoenn Mama is raging. PZZZZ. Amid the remnants of Tiger Kill, Sun had detected an energy he had never expected to find. Lab Director Sang.1's Tiger Kill was not only infused with fighting spirit, but also with the painfully stinging energy of death, ghost energy. As the director looked down at Sun, a pair of ghostly green wisps shone in his eyes. Gur! Lab Director Sang.1 growled loudly with rage, a sound halfway between the cries of an animal and a ghost. Suddenly, Sun came to a realization, and his gaze turned cold. He's a ghost soldier. Chapter 56. The Dream, 6, you are listening at novelfull.audio. In truth, it was no exaggeration to say Sun had been lucky to have hunted the guard so easily. Just creating the Jigwee's Ian fire had been enough to destroy half the research facility. Things had been practically bound to turn out that way, however, even one stray spark could cause a catastrophe to strike an ordinary oil refining facility, so how could the research lab remain intact even after multiple explosions? However, Sun assumed he could not count on being lucky again, as Lab Director Sang.1 had detected him. Unless he was a fool, the director would never let Sun use his concealment skill again. And yet, what surprised Sun the most was that Sang.1, the lab director, was a ghost soldier. Is the White Tiger clan not stopping at making disposable people into ghost soldiers? Sun wondered. That meant that ghost soldiers were not necessarily disposable. In hindsight, it would have been a natural conclusion if Sun had thought about it some more. Creating dream spheres required a substantial amount of time and money, and judging from the many research wings and pieces of equipment Sun had seen, creating ghost soldiers needed more than just dream spheres. Of course, they're all destroyed now. Sun thought with a faint grin. It was likely that most of the White Tiger clan's executive members had gone through the ghost soldier transformation. This is actually for the best. Sun thought, changing his plans. At first, he had intended to retreat after wreaking moderate havoc and finding out Executive Director O's weakness, but seeing as he had figured out that the White Tiger clan's higher-ups were ghost soldiers, he felt that fighting Lab Director Sang.1 would give him good experience. This might be a chance to test what a ghost soldier is capable of. Sun concluded. Your magic integrated circuit has activated, circulating fiercely. The Jigwee's Ian fire is flaring up. As the fire around his body grew larger, Sun gripped Tiamat's snaggletooth more tightly. Distributed 30 additional stats to strength. 111141, strength. 141, plus 55, squeak. Like a spinning saw blade, Lab Director Sang.1's sword had been bearing down on Sun's head, but he was slowly pushed back. Boom! Sun suddenly pushed back with tremendous power, leaving the director shocked for the first time. Distributed 30 additional stats to agility. 101131, agility. 131, plus 45, using all of his Ian fire to make his wings larger, Sun flew at Lab Director Sang.1. As he had become faster and stronger, so too did his attacks with Tiamat's snaggletooth grow more powerful. Screech. Boom, boom, boom. Although Lab Director Sang.1 staggered backward, he managed to regain his balance and deflect Sun's attacks one by one. Each time their weapons clashed, a metallic screech filled the air and several explosions large and small occurred. A hideous scowl spread across the director's face, his pride hurt by the fact that he was exchanging attacks with a trainee. However, his eyes remained full of greed to possess Sunday. If Sun could grow that quickly, the director could not even imagine how strong he would be as a guild owl. I definitely have to have you, Lab Director Sang.1 said with a grin. Boom, boom, boom. The director swung his sword more quickly. Your opponent's sword now contains a large quantity of ghost energy. The aura of Tiger Kill intensifies. Caution. Swish, swoosh, swish. Whenever Lab Director Sang, one swung his sword, several gusts of slicing wind scattered across the area and clawed the floor. Each gust was an advanced combination of tiger teeth and tiger claw, reminding Chang, son of a tiger that snatched people and livestock away from a village, taking them back to its mountain in the dark of the night. That was how a tiger earned the name Hoenn, which referred to a disaster caused by a tiger. The word mama referred to its ominous ghost energy. Ref, the mama, in Hoenn mama, is actually a term ordinary used to deify smallpox, ref. The director had become the embodiment of the Hoenn mama, which had terrorized humans for a long time. PZZZ, spark. However, Lab Director Sang one was not Chang.Sun's only problem. You bastard. I'll kill you. Let me help you, Lab Director. PZZZZ. After some time, the 8 surviving guards pulled themselves together and unleashed their own ghost energy. As they emanated tiger kill auras infused with ghost energy, more Hoenn mamas were created, and green wisps began to glow in their eyes. Are they also ghost soldiers? Chang.Sun wondered, turning sideways while pushing Lab Director backward. Fire rose from Chang.Sun's feet and swirled around him, once again forming a sturdy suit of armor. His Ian fire was thoroughly infused with blood toxin that swiftly bared its fangs. However, the surviving guards threw their swords at the barrier created by the Ian fire, causing it to explode. Rumble. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Stop. Get him. Although the guards were not as skilled as Lab Director Sang one, they were still highly competent. The ghost energy that suffused their attacks slowed down their reasoning, but maximized their damage, making every attack sharp and relentless. Clash, clash, clash. It's going to be dangerous if I do nothing. Chang.Sun thought. Slash, slash. One of the guards, Tiger Teeth, broke through the Ian fire barrier and slashed open Chang.Sun's thigh. A Tiger Claw cleverly exploited Chang.Sun's blind spot, leaving a deep cut in his left shoulder. Each attack was extremely dangerous, which meant Chang.Sun could have been seriously injured if not for Viper Eyes and Beast Senses. Chang.Sun realized how the White Tiger clan had suddenly become powerful over the past 10 years. Ordinary players on the same level would never be able to go up against them. It seemed Chang.Sun had to give more credit to the ghost soldiers than he had initially thought. He realized he was lucky to have been able to destroy the ghost soldier depository beforehand. If he had needed to fight against all the ghost soldiers, he would have already ended up collapsing onto the ground. A brawl is taking place. The skill Unyielding Spirit has been activated, reinforcing your potentially wavering concentration. The skill Composed Spirit has been activated, enabling you to rationally observe the situation. As such, Chang.Sun coldly analyzed the situation by properly applying Unyielding Spirit and Composed Spirit. Even though he was using Jigwee's phantom body, Chang.Sun was unsure whether he could win in a 1-on-1 fight against Lab Director Sang one. However, one thing he was sure of was that he would definitely lose if he had to take on 8 ghost soldiers. So I'll have to defeat them one by one. Chang.Sun thought. If he could not take all of them at once, he would have to reduce the number of his enemies. The skill Beast Senses is searching the surroundings. Avoiding head-on clashes as much as possible, Chang.Sun utilized the Jigwee's Ian fire to stop them from joining forces, continuously retreating using Wind's Talking Tiger. Lab Director Sang one and the guards became more nervous as Chang.Sun continued to avoid their attacks right before they hit him. His movements were so sly and agile that they were forced to move more, depleting their stamina. Additionally, whenever Chang.Sun saw an opportunity, he never missed, stabbing Tiamat's snaggletooth into their bodies. Soon, 2 guards lay fallen on the ground, reducing the number of survivors from 8 to 6. At that moment, "I've got you, you rat bastard," a guard yelled. Chang Sun had run into a dead-end hallway. As the end was surrounded by 3 walls and the guards were blocking the only exit, it seemed he had nowhere else to run, leaving the guards in high spirits. The guard who had lost his closest colleague in the explosion sprang forward to kill Chang Sun, filled with a desire to kill the man by any means necessary. "Keep your goddamn head down, you stupid bastard." Lab Director Sang One hurriedly yelled. He was anxious to see that Chang Sun remained calm despite being in a dead end. Come to think of it, even though Chang Sun was trapped, the hallway was too narrow, only wide enough for 2 guards to go against him at once. Swirl. Just as planned, Chang Sun unfurled his bracelet like a ball of yarn. Using his 3-tailed whip, which was filled with his magic and covered in Ian fire, Chang Sun lashed the hallway floor. Ha! The guard who was within the whip's attack range instinctively raised his sword to block the first tail, but... Swirl! Chang Sun quickly immobilized him for a moment using the second tail. No. Crash! With the third tail, Chang Sun struck the guard's head, killing him on the spot by crushing his head like a melon. The other 2 guards who had been following behind him were left in a predicament, letting out exclamations. Wait. Arg. Get out of my way, bastards. Swirl. Chang Sun divided the first tail of the whip, which had been sent flying upward, into 3 strands that lashed the guards' bodies. The attack's sheer power forced the 2 backward, afraid of getting killed like their colleague. They tried to make some distance between Chang Sun and themselves, but they were unable to retreat due to the other guards right behind them. In the end, Chang Sun swung the remaining tail in the direction of the lined-up guards and crushed both of their heads at once. His attacks were extremely accurate. The authority perfect marksmanship has been applied. Perfect marksmanship was an authority that enabled Chang Sun to hit his target no matter what by reversing the order of causality. The authority applied not only to projectiles, but also to long-range weapons such as whips. It became even more effective if Chang Sun could lead a large number of enemies into a narrow space. That was how he had been able to instantly kill 3 guards, even though all he had done was change the location. The Celestial, a good season to hunt, arrogantly watches how well you use her authority. Swirl. What on earth is happening? The guards shouted, perplexed. Chang Sun retracted and unfurled his whip multiple times, letting it fly all over the narrow hallway. As it seemingly moved around with no pattern, the guards could not get close to Chang Sunday. Thus, the skill, Wind's Talking Tiger, has been activated to the fullest extent. While the guards hesitated, Chang Sun flapped his wings and closed the gap quickly. Then, he struck the closest guard's neck with the pommel of Tiamat's snaggletooth. Smack! Crash! Even though the remaining guards attempted to capture him, Chang Sun managed to retreat and unfurl his whip, leaving the guards in an absurd situation where they could neither approach or retreat. Lab Director Sang One could only watch in frustration. At first it seemed as if Sang One and the guards could capture Chang Sun if they pressured him a little more, but the heat of the Ian fire and the unpredictable trajectory of his whip prevented them from doing anything. They felt as if they were the ones backed into a tight corner, not Chang Sunday. Smash! Ugh! One of the guards groaned as he collapsed, blood bubbling up from a hole in his neck. Soon, only 1 guard remained, his face pale as paper. Although the guards had outnumbered Chang Sun, they had suffered a crushing loss, leaving the lone survivor dispirited. In his current state, it would not be strange for him to die at any moment, just like his colleagues. I have to do something. Lab Director Sang One thought, gritting his teeth. He had used up too much time trying to capture Chang Sun, which meant the head office had probably found out what happened by now. That meant Director Guan would soon arrive at the lab, leaving Lab Director Sang one little opportunity to run away if he wasted any more time. Move! Lab Director Sang One yelled, yanking the remaining guard by the neck and pushed forward. Even though he had wanted to avoid injury as much as possible, now was not the time to worry about that. I just have to reach him somehow. My level and overall stats are much higher than his, so if I can get close, I'll be able to subdue him. Sang one thought. B-no-l-m swirl, swirl, swirl. Ting. 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 Lab Director Sang.1's splendid swordsmanship continuously deflected the strikes from Chang.Sun's whip, which now had 9 tails. Although his lab coat was torn and his defensive equipment cracked with each blow he took, the director did not care, believing he could still resolve everything if he could just get to Chang.Sunday. Soon, the director managed to close in on Chang.Sunday. Despite his overwhelming power and speed, Chang.Sun seemed to be lacking stamina. He had likely used a lot of his stamina and sustained injuries from having to take on all the guards at once. By now, Chang.Sun's dangerous whip attacks and his Ion fire had become much weaker. In contrast, Lab Director Sang.1 had mostly managed to conserve his strength. That meant he could capture Chang.Sun by fighting him on point 1. Clang. With a loud, metallic ring, Chang.Sun was pushed backward while blocking Lab Director Sang.1's attack using Tiamat Snaggletooth. The director reached out and tightly grabbed Chang.Sun's collar, shoving him against a wall. I finally got you. Lab Director Sang.1 snarled with a grin, the wisps in his eyes glowing more bizarrely than ever with the desire to make Chang.Sun into a Gildao. Ha! Chang.Sun spat coldly, despite the fact that he was being choked by the director. He replied, "You must have thought you could somehow subdue me if you just caught me, huh?" What? Lab Director Sang.1 exclaimed. However, before the director could react, Chang.Sun quickly passed Tiamat Snaggletooth from his right hand to his left and poured his magic into the seal on the back of his right hand. The seal shone brilliantly, and all the blood Chang.Sun had shed until now quickly gathered in his palm, forming a bronze longsword. The Gyuchang sword has appeared. As Chang.Sun grabbed the weapon. Roar! The Gyuchang sword let out a long cry. Bong, bong, bong. Just like the sword, Tiamat Snaggletooth shook noticeably, seemingly reacting to the other weapon. The Gyuchang sword, O Yezi the divine blacksmith's masterpiece, had displayed its brilliant light to the world while revealing its true form. Thus, Tiamat Snaggletooth tried to show it was just as good, being Taotai the devil blacksmith's masterpiece. Howl! Chang.Sun ordered Tiamat Snaggletooth, as if he were reciting a magic spell, just as he had done with the Gyuchang sword. The body of Tiamat Snaggletooth twisted, emanating demonic energy. Double sword resonance is taking place. Tiamat Snaggletooth has awakened. Chapter 57. Star, The Dream, 7, you are listening at novelfull.audio. If O Yezi the divine blacksmith had gained everlasting fame by leaving behind a rare handful of masterpieces, Taotai the devil blacksmith had done the same by forging and producing countless masterpieces. The two blacksmiths were still the most famous fine swords pair of rivals among celestials. It was difficult to say whether one blacksmith was better than the other, because they had different goals and had been active in different times and places. Most of the 9 fine swords, the symbols of O Yezi the divine blacksmith, could not even be found. Thus, there had been no chance to compare the fine swords to Taotai the devil blacksmith's masterpieces. However, now that Chang.Sun was holding both of their masterpieces in each hand, just such a chance to compare the two had finally arrived. As the Gyuchang sword, which had finally emerged after drinking its fill of blood, revealed its brilliant light to the world, so too did Tiamat Snaggletooth reveal itself, not wanting to lose to the Gyuchang sword. You have successfully fulfilled part of the hidden conditions required. Taotia's seal has begun shining. A lock has been disengaged. Tiamat Snaggletooth has revealed its hidden form. Whoosh! On the short blade of Tiamat Snaggletooth, Taotia's seal emanated a deep black light. The misshapen, ghost face that made up the seal squirmed, opening its mouth to reveal its vicious fangs and teeth. The more it revealed its teeth, the longer, Tiamat's snaggletooth became. No longer in the shape of a dagger, Tiamat's snaggletooth had transformed into a curved longsword, truly resembling the fang of the gigantic Tiamat. In contrast to the Yuchang sword, which shone a brilliant blue as if the sword were carved from a jewel, Tiamat's snaggletooth gleamed with pitch-black light. Tiamat's snaggletooth, this weapon is made from the tooth of the primordial evil dragon. Her child never stayed at home, so she had no choice but to pull out her tooth and forge it into a weapon. After receiving Tiamat's request, Taotai the devil blacksmith forged the tooth into a weapon, and it was proud enough of its work to carve Taotia's seal into it. The weapon contains strong demonic energy, and as it carries a trace of a good season to hunt, the weapon can become a powerful fang for its wielder. Type: dagger or longsword. Relic. Damage: unmeasurable. Effect: persistent bleeding, evil devourer. Other effects unknown. Asterisk requirements have been partially met. Some of the sword's hidden abilities can be used. Asterisk requirements have not been completely met. Other requirements are needed to awaken the sword's other abilities. Holding a divine sword in one hand and a demonic sword in another, Chang Sun infused them with as much of his magic as possible. Zing. Boom. The swords were undergoing double sword resonance. As the two masterpieces howled simultaneously, they released tremendous amounts of divine and demonic energy at the same time. The mix of two antithetical energies and the Ian fire created a tornado that could make people's teeth chatter in fear. The skill, sword mastery, has been applied. Due to their differences, divine energy and demonic energy could usually never coexist. However, sword mastery, the skill that enabled Chang Sun to handle any weapon that could be categorized as a sword, made their coexistence possible. Sword mastery, a skill that is only achievable by a master swordsman who has succeeded in achieving sword-body union. It can make the swordsman capable of handling any sword in the world as he wills. One who walks the path of the sword will face the forest at the end of the path. Skill level 1. Type: passive. Effect: infinite sword ownership. Infinite sword use. Sword mastery was completely different from other ordinary skills. Unlike active skills that required magic in order to activate, it was passive. That meant it was always in effect, ignoring all the possible restrictions or curses Chang Sun could encounter in battle. Thus, the skill was occasionally considered equivalent to an authority. The most important fact was that Chang Sun absolutely needed to obtain the skill as the first requirement for him to regain his power. King of Weapons, the trait that had created divine Twilight. If he finished leveling up sword mastery, he could acquire Sword Forest. With that trait, Chang Sun would not only be able to handle any weapons that could be categorized as swords, but also become their owner, thus obtaining Infinite Sword Overlord. The first step to acquiring Infinite Sword Overlord was to achieve double sword resonance. The moment Chang Sun unlocked O Yezi the divine blacksmith's legacy treasure and Taotai the devil blacksmith's masterpiece at the same time, he had already begun walking a different path from ordinary players. Achievement unlocked. The two antithetical swords coexistence. Reward: intelligence +5. Increased level of the skill sword mastery. The Celestial, a good season to hunt, looks at you in surprise for having awakened her relic. The Celestial World encircling serpent widens his eyes after witnessing a surprising new method to use a trait. The Celestial Twilight piercing owl asks you to use Taotai the devil blacksmith's weapon to execute justice. The Celestial Abyss chasing great devil is interested in the two masterpieces. The Celestial Calamity Tiger blesses you for having acquired a new fawn. What? Sang, one muttered in surprise. He had no idea what was going on, unlike the Celestials, who had constantly paid close attention to Chang Sun, but he was sure of one thing. The sword Chang Sun had just awakened contained a substantial amount of energy. It was surely a relic-grade artifact that only an apostle could witness. Pa! Kicking off the wall behind him, Chang Sun leaped forward, rapidly approaching Lab Director Sang 1. The director instinctively felt the incoming danger, the beast senses he had received from his guardian, Calamity Tiger, warning him to dodge or else he would die. He tried to step back, but Chang Sun attacked him first. Slash! Chang Sun used the Yuchang sword in his right hand. The blade that held divine energy unleashed an explosion, releasing a diagonal slash of highly concentrated Ian fire. Lab Director Sang 1 swung his sword, just barely managing to block Chang Sun's attack. However, the Ian fire pierced his defenses and exploded right in front of him. Erg! Lab Director Sang 1 groaned. The remnants of his lab coat had burned away completely, and shattered fragments of his armor flew through the air. Although he was not bleeding, severe burn marks in the shape of claws had formed across his body. Chang Sun, who had been left in a tight corner by Lab Director Sang 1's attack, had scored the first real hit. However, the Yuchang sword howled ferociously, as if it were unsatisfied with the attack's result. Boom, boom. At that moment, the Tiamat Snaggletooth in Chang Sun's left hand shook fiercely as if it were pompously telling Yuchang sword to watch and learn. It slashed in the opposite direction of the Yuchang sword strike, from bottom right to top left. Boom! Boom! Ugh! Lab Director Sang 1 groaned as he was pushed back even harder than before. Was it because Chang Sun's second attack used concentrated demonic energy? Or had his stamina instantly been halved by blocking the first strike? The director's sword was half broken, there was a hole in the middle as if a dragon had bitten it, causing it to bend precariously. Zing! Tiamat's Snaggletooth shook once again as if it were showing off its power to the Yuchang sword, saying it had simply been hiding its great power. The demonic sword created from the primordial evil dragon and forged by Taotai the devil blacksmith flaunted its power as much as possible, proclaiming that it was the greatest sword of its generation and that O Yezi the divine blacksmith's legacy treasure was just full of hot air, riding on O Yezi's past reputation. Boom! Naturally, the Yuchang sword did not like the situation. Although it was trying to ignore the childish rampage of Tiamat Snaggletooth, retreating at that moment would only hurt its own pride, thus, the Yuchang sword emitted more powerful divine energy, strengthening the Ian fire. The Yuchang sword displays its brilliant blade. The Tiamat Snaggletooth reveals its vicious fangs. Determined to never lose, Tiamat Snaggletooth unleashed a constant stream of demonic energy and flew at Lab Director Sang 1 to drain the life out of him, chasing the man persistently. Rumble! Boom! Chang Sun pushed the Jigwee's Ian fire to the limit, driving Lab Director Sang 1 into a corner. Screaming at the top of his lungs, the director used all sorts of skills, but his screams were muffled by the sound of explosions and his skill effects were blocked by the Ian fire's heat. The aura of Tiger Kill has expanded. A tiger disaster is raging. The tiger teeth are annihilating your enemy. The tiger claw is overwhelming your enemy. The wind-stalking tiger has reached maximum speed. In that moment, Chang Sun became the embodiment of a fierce tiger. With brilliant and cruel claws in each hand, he crushed and overpowered his enemy. Creak! Clang! Like interlocking gears, the divine and demonic swords interacted with each other, combining their respective energies. Soon, however, the mixed energies exploded, as if the swords were taunting, or perhaps even challenging, each other. Although the two swords were known for their different characteristics and personalities, they strangely seemed to share the same affinity, blood. The divine sword, Yuchang sword, and the demonic sword, Tiamat Snaggletooth, loved blood by their nature, sparing no effort to taste. Lab Director Sang.1's blood, they sought to drink every last drop to relieve their thirst. Thus, they were the best match for Chang.Sunday. If they had merely been elegant and graceful swords, they would not have gotten along with Chang.Sun, but they were different. The skill, Black Mountain King's first claw, has been activated. Crack. Rumble. Using powerful Zhenjiao, Chang.Sun crossed the Yuchang sword with Tiamat's snaggletooth. The two swords filled with Ian fire and exploded again, creating a raging whirlpool. Swoosh, swish, swoosh. Several claw-shaped gusts of wind struck Lab Director Sang.1's upper body forcefully. His weakened sword completely shattered, his armor was completely crushed, its fragments digging into his wounds. Despair has spread. Discouragement has deepened. Negative thoughts fill the stage. The Ian fire swallows the tremendous grudge, strengthening itself. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The gusts of wind that had been raging powerfully through the research complex, which had seemed as if they would soon destroy the facility, suddenly subsided. Ugh! The ragged Lab Director Sang.1, still standing in place, coughed up a large quantity of blood. The burn marks all over his body were so severe, it was clear he had no chance to survive. Thud. Lab Director Sang.1 collapsed onto his knees. Although his eyes were already vacant, it seemed he still had some lingering feelings. He moaned softly, "I don't want to die." For a moment, Chang.Sun nonchalantly looked down at the director and pondered whether or not to kill the man on the spot. One swing of his sword would be enough to cut off the director's head like a guillotine. As he no longer had any stamina or mana, he lacked the strength to think rationally. However, Lab Director Sang.1's final regret forced him to move. It seemed as if he did not even know he would die soon. The only thought remaining in his mind was that he had to do something. Come to think of it, I haven't found anything else aside from the ghost soldiers, Chang.Sun realized. While the central research wing was left in chaos by the raging firestorm, Chang.Sun had scoured the entire area, but he had not found anything remotely as significant as the ghost soldier depository. Thus, Chang.Sun speculated that Lab Director Sang.1's final regret was somehow related to Executive Director O. Retrieved the Yuchang sword. Sealed Tiamat's snaggletooth again. Chang.Sun withdrew all his mana. The two swords that had been trembling as if they were competing returned to their original forms. The Yuchang sword flowed back into Chang.Sun's right hand, while Tiamat's snaggletooth turned into a dagger that Chang.Sun slung behind his back. I have to get it, by any means. Lab Director Sang.1 slowly crawled forward on his knees, seemingly looking for something somewhere. Chang.Sun quietly followed him to find out what was more important than the ghost soldiers. Chapter 58. Star, Overwhelmingness, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Thud. The player, Yang Sang.1, has died. Lab Director Sang.1 died extremely suddenly. After passing through the ghost soldier depository, he had reached a cleverly hidden door. All he needed to do was reach out his hand to open the door, but his head slumped down, and he was unable to do so. The door is securely locked. Enter a pattern or a password to unlock the door. The door seemed to be locked with a more advanced security system than the ghost soldier depository. Will it work again? Chang.Sun wondered. As there was a precedent, he simply brought his hand to the touch screen without worrying much about it. Then, Peter's key trembled lightly against his neck, and the touch screen shone brightly once again. Master ID has been confirmed. Click. Zing. The tightly shut door opened wide, as if it were encouraging Chang.Sun to enter. It seems. This key specializes in opening locked devices or doors. Chang.Sun thought. Did the key have any requirements apart from the object having to be locked? Thinking he had to test it out properly later, he went inside. Unlike the ghost soldier depository outside, the inside of the chamber was much narrower. It was 30.3 square meters wide. In the center, there was an altar of the sort used to pray to a deity. The celestial calamity tiger looks at you in surprise for successfully locating this place. The altar consisted of two parts. A main platform upon which sacrificial offerings would be prepared, and a smaller platform placed in front of it. However, what caught Chang.Sun's attention was a woman, lying on the altar with her eyes closed as if she were sound asleep. He was not even sure whether she was alive. She was extremely pale, and her breaths were shallow. On top of that, she was connected to a complicated series of glass tubes protruding from the walls. This woman is Chang. Sun thought. He was familiar with her. What was her name? Was it Shin-un Seo? I think it was something like that. She was the woman who had spoken to Chang.Sun during the tests, telling him she was a long-time fan of his. From what Chang.Sun remembered, she had acted very frivolously and had a twin brother. He had had his eye on her because he could sense her exceptional talent at the start of the training session, but he had not expected to see her here. It looked as if Lab Director Sang-won had also thought so, and thus kidnapped her for her talent. Did she become a ghost soldier? Chang.Sun wondered as he carefully felt Shin-un.Seo's pulse. When he used Viper Eyes, he could not find any protective devices, thus, he was able to analyze the situation without any hindrance. Analyzing the subject. Foreign energy detected. The Hoenn Mama is on alert. Chang.Sun squinted, searching for a dream sphere, and signs of magic being used to turn Un-Seo into a ghost soldier. No, she isn't becoming a ghost soldier. The magic in use is more intense and fundamental. While the Hoenn Mama in a dream sphere could reset a soul, the magic being used here was transforming the soul into an entirely different being. The ones responsible were not simply infusing ghost energy into her, they were also changing her soul's energy into ghost energy. In that case, she would become a being that could no longer be considered human. People usually called such beings aberrations. The word aberration was used to refer to irrational and mysterious beings that could not be understood through human logic. Among them were monsters left only with their violent natures, bizarre-looking yokai, morios, creatures that only wandered hidden planes. Every sort of indescribable being could be classified as an aberration. In a sense, the Jigwis Chang.Sun had killed were also aberrations. This was what Executive Director O tried to hide. Chang.Sun thought. It seemed the ghost soldiers were merely the prototypes for creating an aberration, but Executive Director O had covered up the existence of the aberration in order to use it as his hidden weapon. He called her Gildao. Chang.Sun thought, recalling the word Lab Director Sang-won had muttered to himself while heading toward the door. He had been unsure what the director meant by Gildao, but Un-Seo had to be it. After thinking for a while, Chang.Sun remembered an old folktale that talked about Gildao, the leader of the Dakibi. The director had to have named the aberration after him. The Hoenn Mama's manifestation is in progress. 41% complete. 41%. The number's a bit vague. Chang.Sun thought. The Hoenn Mama's manifestation had not progressed enough for Un-Seo to be called a ghost soldier or a Gildao, but her muscles and bones had become far sturdier than ordinary people's. Her muscle fibers were so tough that a knife would sooner shatter than pierce through her flesh. If she woke up, she would be so strong she could easily take on most players. The skill, Beast Senses, has been used to analyze the subject's condition in detail. While examining Un-Seo's mind to see whether her ego was intact, Chang.Sun checked to see whether removing the glass tubes would affect her badly. Fortunately, they haven't even begun to hypnotize or brainwash her. Chang.Sun concluded. It seemed brainwashing was the last step in guildalization. Un-Seo could potentially suffer from mild amnesia after she woke up, but her ego would be intact. There would be no issues removing the glass tubes either, although she could potentially have some negative reactions. Chang Sun could deal with those. The celestial calamity tiger watches what you are going to do with great interest. The celestial Twilight piercing owl asks you to quickly save the poor woman in front of you. A message implying that Hyoju seemed to be having fun appeared. He assumed that Chang Sun was going to steal Shin-un Co after the guildalization process concluded. He thought that, having already encountered the ghost soldiers, Chang Sun would want a guildao, which would be much stronger. However, even after seeing the messages, Chang Sun pulled out the glass tubes one by one without hesitation. You have removed the glass tubes. The guildalization process has been forced to stop. The forced cessation of the process has left the Hoenn Mama raging. The celestial calamity tiger is very surprised by your choice. The celestial Twilight piercing owl says she knew you would do that. She nods, asking you to quickly get the woman to safety and give her first aid. Just as he had while saving Jiao. Chang Sun infused his magic into Shin-un Co and called forth the Aeon fire. She was instantly engulfed in flames. The Aeon fire of the 8 trigrams brazier is blazing. The process of destruction has begun. The fire is eliminating all toxins. The fire is eradicating all impure energies. The Hoenn Mama is strongly resisting the Aeon fire. The Hoenn Mama attempts to resist. The Aeon fire has suppressed the Hoenn Mama's resistance. The Hoenn Mama tries to defy the Aeon fire. The Aeon fire has crushed the Hoenn Mama's defiance. The Aeon fire is regenerating and healing the subject. While blocking all external stimuli, the fire is healing the subject's wounds. Although the attribute of the single Aeon fire was doom, not regeneration like the fire of the 8 trigram brazier, its original attribute had not completely disappeared. Rather, the Aeon fire destroyed the Hoenn Mama inside Un.Co's body, which would surely have tormented her for her entire life, and thus purified her body. Chang Sun controlled the fire to destroy all the negative effects of guildalization and only leave behind the positive effects. The single Aeon fire and the Hoenn Mama are clashing fiercely. Naturally, it took a while for the Aeon fire to finish its restorative process. However, as with Baek Jiao. Un.Co would have to undergo part of the process herself without Chang Sun's help. Eventually, all Chang Sun could do was wait. He let go of Un.Co's wrist, then headed over to the small platform to see what was on it while the Jigwee's Aeon fire burned the Hoenn Mama. The celestial calamity tiger asks what has happened to your ambition of taking everything. Chang Sun chuckled dryly. He could see what trick Hyoju was trying to pull. It was an attempt to make him interested in guildals and ghost soldiers, thus leading him to do what Hyoju wanted. Just as everyone in the White Tiger clan had been blindly manufacturing the pawns Hyoju wanted, he wished for Chang Sun to do the same. He muttered, "I didn't say I wasn't going to take anything." The celestial calamity tiger tilts his head in confusion, unable to understand you. Thinking it would be better to show Hyoju what he meant to dismiss any doubts, Chang Sun activated his authority on the spot. The authority, soul exploitation, has been activated, exploiting the ashes of all the beings you have killed over the past 24 hours. Oh! Kia! In a flash, ghostly wails filled the room with Chang Sun at their center. Several gloomy gray whirlpools raged, filled with distorted specters and their ashes. They all belonged to the deceased people and monsters Chang Sun had killed over the past day, including the dead ghost soldiers and the Hoenn Mamas within them. Absorbing the ashes. Strength has increased by 0.01. Absorbing the ashes. Agility has increased by 0.02. The Hoenn Mama mixed into the ashes attempts to avoid being absorbed. The authority's power stops the Hoenn Mama's attempts and tries to integrate it by force. Successfully integrated. Successfully purified and used the integrated Hoenn Mama as fuel for the Aeon fire. Magic has increased by 0.02. The celestial calamity tiger bursts into laughter, dumbstruck. The celestial, calamity tiger, shakes the shrine with his loud, manic laughter. Just like the Jigwis, the Hoenn Mamas originated from spirits, seeing as all the spirits Chang, Sun encountered had ended up belonging indefinitely to him so far, it was natural that every Hoenn Mama in the secret tiger lab would likewise be absorbed into him. Click. Click. An immense amount of magic flowed into Chang, Sun like a flooding river, the way it had when he absorbed the Jigwi's fire. Seemingly already used to the process, his magic integrated circuit absorbed the flow without any difficulty by installing additional shunts. Magic. 325, plus 60, as he watched his magic stat increase by 40, Chang, Sun smiled in satisfaction. The celestial, calamity tiger, cannot stop his manic laughter. Hyoju continued to laugh strangely. Chang, Sun stopped walking, feeling nervous for some reason. He recalled what lab director Sang Won had said. While he lay dying, the director had said two things. He had mentioned the Gildao, but the other phrase had been, before they come. When Chang, Sun had pressed him for information on who was coming, the director had answered Inspection Department. If my previous investigation into the White Tiger clan was right, the Inspection Department is on the side of Director Guan Hyo, Hei, Executive Director O's rival, but Executive Director O didn't do anything even though he heard that they were coming. Chang, Sun thought, analyzing the situation. Of course, Executive Director O could have attempted to stop Director Guan and the Inspection Department on the outside without Chang, Sun knowing about it. However, the Inspection Department members making a move meant they had detected something suspicious from the lab, thus, Executive Director O would not have been able to smooth things over without making a very attractive offer. The problem was that Executive Director O had personally asked Chang, Sun to close the Black Blood Mountain Range, even making his asset Songyu, June Tail Chang. Sunday. However, those efforts would never be enough to avoid Director Guan's terrifying inspection. No, how could Executive Director O be sure that Chang, Sun would be able to close the dungeon before Director Guan arrived? The dungeon closure is a separate matter, so it must mean he can get rid of all the evidence related to him before the dungeon closes. Executive Director O just needed the dungeon to be closed, naturally, to erase any evidence he might have left behind by accident. That sly fox of a man would definitely have taken action to make sure everything would be fine even without a dungeon closure. In truth, a question had been bothering Chang, Sun the whole time. If his conjecture about how Executive Director O's weakness was hidden in the Black Blood Mountain Range was right, would he have simply relied on Chang, Sun to take care of everything? For a moment, Chang, Sun had thought that Executive Director O simply had no weaknesses, but finding the Gildal had forced him to discard that conjecture. Then, why had Executive Director O not used the method he had to destroy the evidence, even though he had it? He should have destroyed, hidden, or at least done something about the Gildal. It did not take long for Chang, Sun to come up with the answer, Director Hyo, Hei. Executive Director O was waiting for his rival to visit the secret tiger lab. If Chang. Sun's guess was right, was Hyoju laughing madly because he knew what was going on and having fun watching Chang. Sunday? Wait. Chang, Sun thought urgently, quickly coming back to reality. He had no time to sit idly. He quickly threw everything on the platform into his inventory without checking. Carrying the still recovering CO on his back, he ignited the Ian fire. The title, Jigwi's Phantom Body, has been applied. The skill, Wind's Talking Tiger, has been activated. Escape from your current location as soon as possible. Pa. Quickly breaking the ceiling, Chang, Sun escaped the interior of the research wing. **** shortly afterward. Why isn't anyone coming out? Didn't the inspection department members enter the dungeon? The lab director should have gotten out quickly, but why isn't he? The researchers stomped the ground anxiously as they watched the explosions in the research wing grow larger. Tumble. Deep underground, the ground began to shake. However, no one on the surface felt it due to the explosions in the research wing. In the end, however, disaster struck. Do you feel, someone eventually began, but it was too late. Their voice was drowned out by an explosion that overturned the earth. It was as if a volcano had erupted. Pillars of fire soared wildly into the air, eating away the remaining research wings and manufacturing facilities. Boom. Rumble, rumble. Tumble. 1. In mythology, these refer to the spirits of mountains, rivers, trees, rocks, and the like. Chapter 59. Star, Overwhelmingness. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's a mess, the White Tiger Clan's third in command Guan Hyo Hei, also known as the White Cowl Tiger's Fong, said, sounding dumbfounded. Despite his sly nature, Executive Director O always had a gentle smile. In contrast, Director Guan always maintained a straight face. Thus, he was normally perceived to be the most difficult executive to deal with. However, even he could not hide his shock today. It was understandable, as the secret Tiger Lab, which he had been about to inspect personally, had been blown to pieces, leaving nothing for him to inspect. All traces of it were completely gone, including the mountain range that had been hiding the secret Tiger Lab. Rumble. Whoosh, whoosh. Swoosh, swoosh. The mountain peaks had been replaced with blazing pillars of flame. The fire had even spread to the nearby areas, swallowing up most of the mountain range. Smoke spewed forth and darkened the sky. The heat was also so intense that if the inspection department members and Director Guan had not been sufficiently skilled, they would have been unable to even reach the lab site through the raging fires. Scour this place. Leave nothing behind. Just find something. Come on. The inspection department members were quite perplexed, not having expected to find the lab blown to pieces. However, they reacted quickly, as they were used to office politics. They quickly went to search for any evidence related to the explosions. After half a day passed, the inspection department head approached Director Guan, staring at the ground in shame. His expression was filled with bitterness and anxiety. Have you looked into it? Director Guan asked, biting down on a cigarette even though they were surrounded by fires. Although the inspection department head had been serving Director Guan for over 10 years, he still could not read what was on Director Guan's mind. Thus, he simply bowed and replied, yes, it seems they buried a massive amount of explosives. Director Guan's eyes shone sharply as he repeated, explosives. Yes. All the traces we found are from artifacts such as, Agni's Yawn, Tribulation Fire Zone, Fire Forest, Lightning Grenade. The department head trailed off. They were planning this from the start, Director Guan said, closing his eyes. And it looks as if the mountain fire was started by the Jigwee's Ian fire, the department head cautiously suggested. Jigwee's Ian fire too. Director Guan remarked, chuckling in disbelief. He was well aware of what a Jigwee was. Such a creature had constantly bothered him when he spent some time traveling through the Black Blood mountain range. Although he could easily kill one now, it had been very tricky to deal with one back then. They planned out every part of the lab before they even started building it, Director Guan concluded, as the artifacts listed by the inspection department head were explosive items well known among players. Although other artifacts were also dangerous, the council explicitly prohibited people from using Agni's Yawn due to its exceptional killing power. The more significant point was that the explosives had been placed in such a way as to amplify each other's powers, as opposed to canceling each other out. In other words, an expert had intentionally placed them that way. Only a person like Executive Director O, who had been deeply involved in the lab's construction from the start, could have done such a thing. That was why Director Guan could say for certain that the lab members had been planning this from the start. From the beginning, Executive Director O had prepared to detonate the lab if things went south. Of course, the Jigwee's Ian fire had not been related to Executive Director O at all, but as there were no survivors, Director Guan and the inspection department head had no way of knowing that at the moment. In any event, Director Guan was certain that Executive Director O had been hiding something in the lab. What could it have been? Although Director Guan wanted to know, he would never be able to find out, as not a single trace was left. He thought to himself for a long time, biting down on the cigarette. Soon, however, he dropped it onto the ground and snuffed it out with the tip of his shoe. It seems the original plan was to wait for me to enter the lab and activate the explosives, but why were they activated before I entered? Did Executive Director O make a mistake, or did the explosives malfunction? Director Guan calmly muttered to himself, trying to figure out Executive Director O's motive. However, he sounded as if he were talking about an accident that had happened to somebody else, even though he could have died. The more Director Guan behaved that way, the more scared the inspection department head became. He could not raise his head as he said, "I don't think he made a mistake." "Yes, you're right. That Executive Director O is such a sly snake, he wouldn't make such a mistake," Director Guan said with a frown, crossing his arms. "Then, that means another variable that Executive Director O wasn't expecting must have appeared." The inspection department head remained silent, knowing it was wiser to leave Director Guan to draw his own conclusions in times like this. What could that variable be? Nothing is coming to mind right now, Director Guan wondered. The truth was that Chang Sun had blown up the research wing beforehand, and the shock had detonated the explosives before they were scheduled to go off, but Director Guan and the inspection department head had no way of knowing that either. "Anyway, dig a bit deeper in case we find something," Director Guan said, gesturing at the inspection department head. "Yes, sir," the inspection department head replied with an even deeper bow. However, neither he nor Director Guan truly thought they would really find any evidence, as Executive Director O must have erased it all already. However, they could not just leave Executive Director O alone. In the end, Executive Director Guan had to leave the site without finding anything. The inspection department head kept bowing until he completely disappeared from view. As he heaved a sigh of relief, however, Director Guan suddenly stopped walking, making him gasp in surprise. "By the way," Director Guan said. "Yes, sir." The inspection department head promptly answered. "I heard some useless rat talked," Director Guan said. His tone was flat, but at that moment, the inspection department head felt a shiver running down his spine. "I'll take care of it right away," the inspection department head replied, bowing as deeply as he could. As if to indicate he was leaving the matter to the inspection department head, Director Guan lightly waved his hand and exited the site. However, until he completely left the site, until the inspection department head could no longer hear his footsteps, the department head could not stand up straight. Although a long time had passed, Director Guan's residual energy continued to give him pressure. *****, are you logging out? As he entered the gate that led outside, Director Guan looked up toward where his deity would be watching him. He quietly murmured, "I hope he'll at least give me a hint." The celestial Calamity Tiger is happy that the dungeon is full of turmoil. "I knew it," Director Guan muttered, shaking his head. He had always known that his guardian was not merciful to his followers. Instead, their deity made them fight constantly. After such fights, he granted power to those he considered gems, and authority to those he considered jewels. However, if those gems and jewels were to crack by accident, he would simply discard them without any hesitation. Then he would search for replacements, as he could find many tools that could be his fangs and claws anywhere. If he could gain sturdier claws and fangs through ceaseless battles, Director Guan's guardian would do anything. Although Director Guan had initially joined the White Tiger clan because he liked that aspect of it, the older he got, the less sure he felt that he was on the right path. "I've got no other choice," Director Guan thought with a shrug. As he was his guardian's priest, he could not defy his guardian. No matter what the deity's doctrine was, a priest's duty was to obey it. In order to do so, Director Guan eventually had to get rid of the obstacle in his path named Executive Director O. Thus, his deity naturally wanted him to achieve his ambition. Smiling bitterly, Director Guan entered the gate. Beck Jio.O quietly opened his eyes. Jiao.O thought absent-mindedly. His head was filled with fog, leaving him unable to remember where he was or what he was doing. The same way anyone would feel disoriented after waking up from deep sleep, Jiao.O's mind felt foggy. Are you awake? Chang Sun asked, suddenly bringing Jiao.O back to reality and making him remember everything, from where he had been to what he had gone through. Jiao.O saw Chang Sun faintly smiling right before him, but he was unsure where the other man had returned from, because Chang Sun's clothes were all ragged. As if Chang Sun had gone through a fire, he had several scorch marks on his clothes and soot on his face. There was also an unfamiliar woman on Chang Sun's back. Seemingly sound asleep, her calm breathing was so unlike Chang Sun's own that it looked as if Chang Sun had brought her out of another world. And she's? Jiao.O cautiously asked. I met her nearby. Chang Sun explained. Is she your missus? Ugh. Jiao.O fell backward in the middle of his sentence because he was hit with something blunt, leaving a red mark on his forehead. Smash. Judging from how you're speaking nonsense, I see you've completely healed, Chang Sun said, leaving Jiao.O shocked again. Fixated on the phrase, completely healed, he quickly stood up and looked around to find something that could be used as a mirror. Then, he noticed an item lying by his feet. It was a bronze mirror, and the item that had just hit his forehead. He quickly thanked Chang Sun and picked it up. When he looked in the mirror. Ah! Jiao.O exclaimed inadvertently, not realizing he was starting to sob. The sullen Chang Sun smiled faintly again. Jiao.O found a totally different person looking back at him. His jawline was chiseled, and his facial features were well defined. Although his look seemed a bit sharp, he looked like a traditionally trustworthy, stout, and handsome man with his robust physique and 190 cm height. He left a completely different impression from Chang Sun, who looked like a pretty boy. Jiao.O's eyes teared up. After he turned back to Chang Sun, he wanted to say something, however, he hesitated, not knowing what to say. As he had never received anyone's favor as he grew up, he had barely said thank you to anyone, thus, he could only react that way. Chang Sun was well aware of that reason, so he said nothing. The absence of hideous burn marks was not the only change. As the half-spirit curse that previously tortured Jiao.O had completely melted down, his energies had greatly stabilized overall. You worked hard, Chang Sun said quietly. That one sentence was enough. Drip. A streak of tears ran down Jiao.O's cheek as he bowed silently, expressing his gratitude to his savior, Chang Sun, to the fullest extent possible. 1. This tiger appears in Korean mythology. A monk wearing a white cowl turned out to be the leader of a tiger pack that caused tiger disasters, so Gangnam Chan, a famous general in Korean history, ordered the leader to take his pack and leave the village or else he would kill them all. The leader obeyed his command, and the villagers no longer suffered from tiger disasters. Chapter 60. Star, Overwhelmingness, 3, you are listening at novelfull.audio. O.org, successfully completed the 2 sudden quests, the owl's plea the tiger's plunder. As a reward, the blessing of Twilight, Piercing Owl, will be granted. Currently accessing your achievements to accurately determine which reward to give you. Please wait for a moment. As a reward, you have obtained the right to keep the trophies you have acquired. Acquired, Dream Sphere times 32. Acquired, formerly, Red Ghost's Knife. Acquired, Energy Flask. As a reward, the blessing of Calamity Tiger will be granted. Currently accessing your achievements to accurately determine which reward to give you. Please wait for a moment. A substantial amount of time is needed to accurately analyze your achievements and performance. The celestial, Twilight, Piercing Owl ponders what gift to give you for achieving such high performance. The celestial, Calamity Tiger ponders which Fong to give you to praise your achievements. The moment they concluded that Chang Sun had completed the 2 quests related to destroying the lab, Minerva and Hyoju had been wondering what to give him as a reward. However, it had been quite some time since he finished the quests. It's understandable, seeing as they probably think my alignment leans completely to one side, Chang Sun thought. Even though his alignment slightly leaned more toward evil, he was still in the middle of the scale, as people naturally favored the side that highly appreciated them. Minerva and Hyoju had to be agonizing over what reward to give. The Celestial, a good season to hunt, boasts that it will be very difficult to give a better gift than hers, which suits you very well. Meanwhile, Pabelsag was busy bragging to the 2 deities. In any event, it seemed that the 2 would only be able to give Chang Sun his rewards at a later time, so he decided to wait. Besides, he had no plans to fight for a while. The White Tiger clan must have found out about the lab by now, so everyone in the clan will have flipped out. Chang Sun thought with a faint smile. After calming down, Baek Jio.O slowly raised his head and wiped his eyes as if he suddenly felt shy, but his eyes were as red as his cheeks, making Chang Sun chuckle lightly. But who is she? Jio.O asked as he looked at Shin-un Seo, whom Chang Sun had laid on the ground. He was curious to meet the unfamiliar woman, but I don't know, Chang Sun replied with a shrug. Pardon? Jio.O asked cautiously. I just found her being held captive somewhere, so I brought her with me, Chang Sun explained. Oh, Jio.O said with a nod. Although he did not know Chang Sun had visited the secret tiger lab, he knew Chang Sun had other agendas he was unaware of, thus, he simply assumed the woman was a survivor of one such thing. Then do we have to leave her like this? Jio.O asked, looking at Un Seo worriedly. It had not been long since he was cured of the half-spirit curse, but he pitied Un Seo. He might be bad at expressing his emotions, but he still does. He also seems to be good-hearted. Chang Sun observed. Due to Jio.O's half-spirit curse, it had been difficult to see any changes in his facial expression, but not anymore. His kind nature made Chang Sun want to take him along even more. People who suffered from discrimination and violence often turned out with crooked natures. Having grown up watching such things, their ways of thinking would automatically be affected. However, Jio.O had no such issues, apart from being a pessimist. That meant he was born to be a man of great caliber and good nature like his father. Despite his notorious reputation in heaven, Xerxes had often left Chang Sun frustrated with his tender-heartedness. He's like a dog. Chang Sun concluded. Naturally, that sounded strange, but he did not mean it in a bad way. Although a dog would remain alert against strangers, it would gently wag its tail after opening up to them. After reassessing Jio.O, Chang Sun answered, she'll wake up on her own, as I administered first aid. Jio.O nodded, fixing his gaze on Chang Sun with eyes full of absolute trust. It seemed he would believe everything Chang Sun said, even if he told Jio.O that 1 + 1 was 3. Just then. Un Seo groaned, her eyes twitching for the first time. Surprised and unsure what to do, Jio.O began fidgeting. However, Chang Sun felt distracted, gesturing at Jio.O to stay put as he woke Un Seo up. Hey, Miss Shin-un Seo. Can you hear me? Chang Sun called out after digging up her name from his memory. When she heard Chang Sun, Un Seo quietly opened her eyes. As she gained focus, she saw Chang Sun looking at her. Facing the last person she had expected to see, her eyes widened. It was only natural for her to be surprised, as she had been a fan of Chang Sun for a long time. Can you hear me, Miss Un Seo? Can you tell me who I am? Chang Sun repeated. However, Un Seo did not answer, and instead lay still with her eyes shut. Unable to understand what she was doing, Chang Sun and Jio.O tilted their heads in confusion. I must be dreaming. How can I still dream about him during training? I must have gone crazy, Eun Seo mumbled to herself, falling asleep again. Chang, Sun and Jio.ul were unsure how to react, shooting each other dumbfounded looks and blinking silently. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, did you, the tyrant, really s.save, m.me. Eun Seo stuttered, almost losing her mind after she heard Chang.Sun's explanation of what had happened. She was so excited that she was unable to sit still, making Chang.Sun briefly wonder if smoke would come out from her nostrils at any moment. Luckily, she seemed to be unable to remember what had happened after she was kidnapped, just as Chang.Sun expected. Perhaps her defense mechanisms had subconsciously activated to protect her ego, or the dream sphere, caused temporary memory loss. Whatever the cause was, she could not remember what had happened at all. Chang.Sun thought it was better for her to forget what had happened, as such incidents often became a source of trauma that could corrode a person's mind. Of course, I have to constantly help her stay mentally stable. Chang.Sun thought. Meanwhile, Eun Seo was still incredibly excited, making Chang.Sun wonder whether there was any side effect of the dream spheres that he did not know about. By any chance, did I drool or say nonsense while slept? Eun Seo trailed off, busy trying to read Chang.Sun's mind. After recalling the sleep talk he had heard when he brought her along from the lab, Chang.Sun shook his head, thinking it would not be good to bring it up. He replied, "You didn't." Really? Eun Seo asked again. "Really, you didn't," Chang.Sun repeated. "Phew. That's a relief," Eun Seo said, heaving a sigh of relief only after Chang.Sun firmly shook his head. However, when Chang.Sun stood up, Eun Seo subconsciously stared at him in surprise. "It seems you've gotten better, so let's get out of here first. As you can see, we aren't exactly safe here," Chang.Sun said, planning to observe her for the time being in order to see whether there would be any unexpected side effects. However, Eun Seo was practically about to faint from excitement, due to the way Chang.Sun had not only saved her but also offered to find her colleagues. The tyrant Lee Chang.Sun she knew had never been kind to anyone. Whenever fans asked for his signature, he had always coldly rejected their requests without explaining why. This time, however, he had made a kind offer despite his usual cold tone, making her heart flutter. Can this really be happening? I'm not dreaming, right? I'm awake. I'm awake. Eun Seo thought elatedly. At that moment, however, she suddenly came to her senses. During her player qualification test, she had watched visual aids that warned about doppelganger-type monsters that disguised themselves as humans and lured players into traps. When she recalled that, she hurriedly moved far away from Chang.Sun, staying on her guard like a scared kitten. Wondering what was wrong with Eun Seo now, Chang.Sun and Jio.ul turned back to look at her. Eun Seo sharply narrowed her eyes and asked, "What's your blood type?" "It's type B," Chang.Sun answered. "When's your birthday?" Eun Seo quickly added. "It's January 30th, Chang.Sun replied, tilting his head in confusion. "What's your favorite food?" Eun Seo continued, her eyes shining. "It's kimchi.jjigae, but why are you suddenly asking these questions?" Chang.Sun asked, squinting in response to her strange behavior. However, Eun Seo did not lower her guard easily, replying, "That's not your favorite food." "That's weird, because I accurately remember that 2 years ago, on August 23rd, you said you wanted to eat tuna gimbap first after returning to Korea. That was during an interview you had after pulling off a come-from-behind victory to beat the French team in San Francisco, 3.2. Chang.Sun was dumbstruck. "I'm right, aren't I? Yeah, my appa is the embodiment of rudeness, so he wouldn't be kind like you. You're fake, aren't you? Who are you?" Eun Seo replied with a smirk. It seemed that Eun Seo had misunderstood and thought Chang.Sun was a doppelganger, but it would be difficult to explain himself. Although the game had happened 2 years ago on Earth, it had happened several hundred years ago for Chang, Sun, so he could not even remember it. He had just answered, kimchi.jjigae, because his mother had been making the dish often as of late. What should I do? Should I just leave her here? Chang, Sun quietly wondered. Ha! My bad, you're my appa. Hee, when did kimchi.jjigae become your favorite food? Seo suddenly asked with a grin, lowering her guard and standing beside Chang, Sun and Jiao.ul again. Confused by the sudden change, Chang, Sun tilted his head and asked, what made you change your mind again? The look on your face, Seo said, beaming. Chang, Sun was bewildered. You considered leaving me here just now because I was bothering you, right? Yeah, my appa would definitely do that, Seo explained. Which direction should I go now? Is it this way? Seo asked, taking the lead. After watching her for a moment, Chang, Sun chuckled. Although it was hard to read what was going on inside her head, Seo was somewhat adorable. It was hard to hate her. You're silly, Chang, Sun remarked, chuckling as he slowly began moving. Jiao.ul laughed along as he followed them. 1. Kimchi stew, a traditional Korean dish. 2. Rice and fillings, in this case, tuna mayo, rolled in seaweed, similar to Japanese maki but without vinegared rice, also a traditional Korean dish.